January 6th will be wild. He put that out into the ether and saw it happen. And you have to just look at the organizers, the people who got the permits to gather at the Capitol that day. There is a pattern of appalling behavior from this guy and the people who surround him that lead me to question his integrity, his morals, and a pattern of serving himself and his ego at every turn without any exception that I can ever find.
Brian, so good to have you back, man.
Thanks for having me. I had so much fun listening to our earlier podcasts, and I'm excited to continue our conversation.
Yeah, and this one should have video, which will be nice.
We'll hope for the best.
The issue was something with one of my cameras. I caught us an issue before, and you know, I was thinking one of the things I really like about this, and I'm sure most people are like this, like I don't always know what to say in the moment. And sometimes you have to go back and look at things, right? You have to like, I really don't know as much as I maybe thought about that, or we dove into some areas that I'm not completely sure of my thoughts on. So you get a chance to, you know, reflect and come back to the conversation, which is really cool.
And if you're not willing to do that, I don't see how you can be an intellectually honest person, by the way. So it's a credit to your character.
Yeah, and you know, I wanted to mention this. I've mentioned it on the podcast that I had a falling out with a friend over Facebook trying to have a political conversation, and that friend is you. Yeah. And if anyone is watching this who is, you know, maybe has gone through that, where, you know, you lose a friendship via online communication that just isn't right. Not that you have to, not some relationships should just end, right? Some people aren't compatible as friends anyway, but I think we're very compatible as friends. And the difference is we saw each other in person at Dave's wedding, and both of us were excited to see each other because both of us are like, I think you're more empathic than me, empathetic, but I tend to be pretty empathetic, and like I reflect on my behavior, and I know I can be kind of harsh when I talk to people sometimes, and online is always a little harder because we tend to forget that we're dealing with a person, even if it's someone we know sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, so we've known each other for many years.
Yeah.
Been on cool camping adventures and out in the wilderness, and great talks over campfires and under the stars with my telescope, you know. And I grew a mutual respect for one another, and then we started to get into a thread online.
Yeah,
and in that, the way I type and the way you read and the way you type and the way I read don't always perfectly align, and we started to, I think, drift from our understanding, and in our frustration, you know, couldn't hear each other the way that if we were sitting here we would.
Yeah.
I was glad we got a chance to revisit that, because it's always bothered me.
Yeah. Same here.
That we couldn't see eye to eye on this, and it turns out the problem was the format of the discussion. And once we were able to say, oh, let's let that be, we just pick up our friendship. And I'm really glad we did.
Yeah, well, and we still don't see eye to eye on a lot of things, or at least politically. Like outside of politics, I think we're pretty much in agreement on like a lot. The majority of things,
agree.
Right? Politics is just an especially divisive topic, you know, for many reasons, but
I'm also satisfied that you've come to your conclusions honestly.
Yeah.
You know, I've come to different conclusions, but there's different data, different evidence that I weigh differently than you or any other human being. And it's okay if we don't agree on everything. It'd make for a pretty shitty podcast.
Yeah. I'm very open to you critiquing anything I say, anything I said in the previous podcast episode. I'm open to criticism. As long as people aren't like being like, you are a bad person for what you say. Like, I don't care. As long as you're not like, somebody's not insulting me. Rip my theories and hypotheses up all you want. Like, doesn't bug me. And I know you're the same way. Like, it's
I'd rather become right.
Yeah.
Than persist in thinking I'm right all along.
Side question. do you believe in truth? Like objective truth?
I'm barely sure that I exist. Right? I'm pretty sure, but I'm not certain it's not a simulation and I'm not in a vat somewhere. I'm not sure I'm not dreaming because I've had dreams this real.
Yeah.
Our brain is capable of anything. And so I think it's a bridge too far for me to say much certainty of anything beyond my own existence, and everything after that is my best guess.
Yeah, I've thought about like objective truth, and it's like there are things that I think there are truths about objective truth. It's like perspective is a lot. Like what is true to somebody can be based on perspective, and it can vary from person to person. So I do believe things can be true, at least in the plane of existence that we accept as reality, you know? But I also don't know if there's objective truth in a lot of regards.
So we only have our perceptions, right? The photons hit our eyeballs and the sound waves hit our eardrums.
Yeah.
And then there are these little wires that go into this perfectly dark circle that contains my brain.
Yeah.
That's where the thinking happens, and it's all going on inside a pitch black skull.
Yeah.
There's no light in there. So I am perceiving the present moment slightly late, and my perceptions are as real as they're going to be. But what I perceive, do I perceive accurately? Who knows?
Yeah. I do want people to know this about you, since you've only, we did one conversation so far on the podcast. It was 2 episodes. And obviously we were talking about politics, which we'll talk about today too. I do want people to know that you are far, far deeper than politics. And I hope the same for me. I'm more than politics. I just find politics interesting because I find divergence of opinion really interesting. And I feel like it's ripe ground for learning. Like
completely.
I mean, we're not gonna, if we're just having a conversation, it's like, I believe this. And you're like, I believe that too. I believe this. I believe that too. It'd be boring as shit. Like no one would want to listen to that. And not that you have to have disagreement to have an interesting conversation. It can be new territory. You know, you can be teaching me something about astronomy, or we could be diving into a philosophical conversation that maybe we don't even believe in a truth in that regard. We're just discussing ideas and being devil's advocates and stuff like that. So I do want people to know that you're much deeper than these topics that we're diving into currently, and we'll be diving into a lot more over time, because you're a fascinating person. You're one of those people. I have a few friends where I'm like, I just never get sick of the conversation, and you're one of them.
Oh, thank you. I feel the same, my friend.
I think the fact that we went for 4 hours in our last conversation is evidence of that.
Just blew by.
It flew by. So,
well, and we had met privately before recording a couple of times, and we talked 3, 4, 5 hours.
Yeah.
No problem.
Yeah.
It was so much fun to do it.
Well, it's one of those things as a podcaster, even we were talking right before we went live, and it's like some of the stuff wasn't stuff that we weren't interested in like putting on the podcast necessarily, but there's a lot of parts of that conversation where some of this would be so good to be capturing, recording, just the conversation that isn't planned or anything like that. And we don't have plans for this conversation. It's pretty spontaneous, although I am going to try to keep us on track a little bit, because I do realize, and I'm sure you notice this, we're all over the place, like, constantly. And I think it's because we're generalists. We see patterns, and we connect things between interdisciplinary connections, you know? So it's like, we'll be talking about something and it's like, oh, this triggers some thought that it's like kind of not even related, but we can relate it, and we start going all over the place. So
it's a neurodivergent thing, and we're 2 peas in a pod there for sure.
Yeah. So let's start ripping up each other's ideas a bit.
Well, I want to get into your question about truth is kind of an interesting one. I've been thinking about this lately. When you say truth, do you mean an accurate representation of some objective reality? And let me give you an example of what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
In 1921, we had the first photographic plates that showed the existence of Pluto. Okay.
Yeah.
It was down at Mars Hill in Flagstaff, Arizona. And that's when we first saw it.
Yeah.
It existed that day once we discovered it. But as far as the awareness of every human being who has ever lived, there was no such thing as Pluto.
Yeah.
Until it was detected, until it was perceived. And then, as if magically, poof, pops into the awareness, our understanding that there's this orbiting body way out beyond, the orbits of Saturn and usually Neptune.
Yeah.
But what is it that existed about Pluto before its discovery that's different from how Pluto exists post-discovery? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So,
it's kind of like it's kind of the question of if a tree falls in the woods, does it make a sound?
Yeah.
It's like intuitively we think yes, but then at the same time, if no one is there to observe it, can we know for sure?
does something that is not perceived in any way exist? And the answer is it must, because when we looked up, there was Pluto.
Yeah.
So there's this objective existent universe that we are all kind of dreaming our way through.
Yeah.
And perceiving that objective reality to varying degrees of distortion, misunderstanding, confusion, and a very limited view of what it is. Like we can't hear in ultrasonic and subsonic. We can't see in infrared or ultraviolet. We only have our human flavored senses. We can't smell pheromones. We can't sense magnetism. Apparently you can learn how to do that.
Really? That's interesting.
Oh, yeah, do you want to hear how it's done?
Yeah.
So they put a belt around a person and they wear this belt for a few days. And the belt has these little motors, these little oscillating, vibrating things like in your phone. When your phone vibrates, there's this little oscillating thing that goes bzzz, and there's a belt just made of those.
Yeah.
And then there's hooked up to a directional compass that tells what way's north. And the only one that buzzes very slightly is the one that faces north. And as you turn to face, if you're facing north, it's buzzing in the front.
Yeah.
And if you turn around and face south, it's now buzzing in the back. If you face east, it's buzzing on whichever side that is, right? So after a while, you can take off the belt and you can remember which way is north.
Interesting. How is that sensing magnetism though?
Well, it's a fair question. They've done a lot of looked at a lot of satellite photographs of cattle.
Yeah.
And cattle tend to line up with the directions of the earth in huge numbers.
Yeah.
Which means they must have some sort of magnetic awareness. I'm sure they don't give it the slightest thought.
Yeah.
But because we're mammals, that means that wiring's old enough that it's probably still in us, but latent, like what would we call that? Prehensile.
Prehensile.
Yeah, prehensile is no longer used. Like your tailbone is a prehensile tail. It used to be. Or does that mean you can curve with it? I can't remember. Is that like a monkey has a prehensile tail?
Prehensile does mean,
the monkey can grip a branch. Yeah. So it's whatever. It's a holdover from evolution, like our appendix or parts of our body we don't use anymore because we've evolved past.
Yeah. I mean, I remember learning about sea turtles, and like there's that mystery of like how they find their nesting ground from where they were born, decades
Great
after.
Question.
And it's like, my thought on that is like, well, obviously most likely there's just something we're not able to like perceive that's going on, because obviously there's something happening that is consistent.
Yes.
That turtles can find their ground back. And I mean, magnetism is a likely culprit there, but we don't know for sure.
Yeah, is there some TPS, a turtle positioning system?
Yeah, and it's like we don't know what eagles see, because we don't. I mean, I guess we can now that we can create lenses that can maybe see what they can see, maybe. I guess we would have to, but even that is a little hard because if you are recording something and you're recording ultraviolet, you have to convert it to the light spectrum that we can see.
For our dumb eyes, yeah.
For us to see. So are we actually seeing what they see? No.
No, we're not. We know for a fact they're not.
Yeah.
We like you look at certain flowers and things like the mantis shrimp.
Yeah.
And with the UV and infrared spectra, there is way more information and detail there that bees and birds must be able to see.
Yeah.
But we don't because it's not evolutionarily relevant, but it sure is to bees and birds.
Yeah. A question, not to just like abruptly change, but I want to talk about our last conversation because there were a few things that we could go deeper into and probably discuss a little bit more. And we both had to kind of listen to the episode and reflect on the conversation. One of the things I recall, when you said you question Tulsi Gabbard's
her credentials,
I kind of like cut you off and like assumed why you didn't, but I didn't give you a chance to actually explain that. Could you kind of go into like why you think she might not have the right allegiances?
So it's been a while since I've gotten into this. A lot of these names were around during the Trump's second impeachment, and I don't have my background on that for her at top of mind, but there does appear to be a pattern of individuals with suspicious ties to the Russian government in the Trump administration. It seems to be that. And even when he was first getting elected, he said, Russia, if you're listening, what the Sam hell was that?
Well, yeah. I mean, about the Hillary Clinton's emails, right? Like, he said something like he hopes they find her emails or something like that. Which, it's crossing a line, but...
I agree.
I don't think he's saying Russia hacker. It's like, if you have the emails, we'd love to see. I don't know. Maybe. I mean,
it's a weird request for an American presidential candidate.
Yeah, I could agree with that.
Anyway,
but so
I'm afraid I don't have it off the top of my head, and I won't.
But with Tulsi, you don't like. I think there's a narrative around her allegiances being questionable, but I haven't seen any evidence to suggest, like, I know she reached out to Assad, or she visited Assad in Syria and said he's not our enemy or something like that. People didn't like that. I don't know of any Russian contacts with her, although people in politics tend to have contacts in different countries.
Sure.
This is something I did mention, and I would say this again. Trump, his campaign, there are people who had ties to the Russian government. But you will find that in every single presidential campaign. I would guarantee that Hillary Clinton's campaign, there were people in her circle that had ties to the Russian government.
I don't see how that excuses it.
That excuses that
that behavior.
Oh, I'm not excusing that behavior. I'm just saying in general, like, the fact that somebody has people in their circle with ties to Russia doesn't mean they're a Russian agent.
Right. It means the nature of the tie. The question is, what is the nature of those ties?
Yeah.
Who are they tied to, and for what purposes?
Yeah.
And I am deeply suspicious of the motives of the Trump administration and the people who are running it. Do we want to go this direction? Like, because it's a pretty interesting moment right now in our government's history, where the president has justified a unanimous Supreme Court ruling against him, 9-0, against a nearly handpicked court.
The guy who got deported, right?
Yeah, it was.
This is the Colombia guy, right? Not the. There's another guy recently who was deported to El Salvador. This isn't the El Salvador guy, right?
That is the one I'm thinking of. But tragically, there are many such examples of people being kidnapped by the government, and then taken to a foreign country without due process. And people say, "Oh, he wasn't an American citizen." Well, that's their claim. But if we don't have due process for everybody, then we don't have due process for anybody. Green card holders, visas holders are just being abducted and taken away in the night.
This is one of the things there's many things I am critical of Trump about. One of the things I find in these conversations, I do find certain things, like, I don't think the Russian narrative is worth considering too much unless there's real evidence that comes out. Like, the FBI, the CIA, all of these entities have investigated Russian collusion. They determine that Russia interfered in the election, which is obvious because they just interfere in elections. But they have determined that there was no collusion with Russia at all.
Well, that's the way Trump casts it, but I don't think that's.
Well, we pulled up. I mean, we talked to ChatGPT last episode, and ChatGPT said, "Well, here is one thing. You said there was no exculpatory evidence. But that's not how evidence works. Like, the burden of proof is on the state, right? So you either prove that somebody did something or they're innocent."
So, exculpatory evidence would demonstrate innocence. Now, we have the presumption of innocence. But the fact that there was lots of inculpatory evidence and no exculpatory evidence is a red flag.
But the inculpatory evidence was the only crime in the Mueller report that they really have evidence of is obstruction of justice, which I've already said this. Like, if you're being investigated for something that's not true and you have the power to interfere in that process, I guess it's a crime, but it's a crime to cover up a non-crime. So it's not the most, it has no real merit to me, because it's like, well, he obstructed justice to, like, prove his innocence or something he didn't do. Like, there's no evidence that he's colluded with Russia, like, zero.
I disagree.
But where is it, though?
Okay. Do you remember toward the end of I think the second one, we started to talk about the Marshall Plan. You brought that up. Did you ever go look up that?
Yeah, he did. He was involved in politics prior to that, so that wasn't the start of his.
What else did you find? As far as I know, he had not been involved in politics prior to that.
His involvement increased after that. But again, it's like, well, even if you're influenced by people in Russia, like if you go to Russia and you talk to people and they tell you what they perceive in the United States and some of the problems, and you're like, I actually agree with that. Does that mean you're colluding with Russia, or you're just open to opinions that are not necessarily American? Because I said it in the last episode, sometimes your interests are going to align with other countries. And I think...
Yeah, New Zealand's trying to save the forests or the coral reefs or whatever. You said
that I was basically saying exactly what he was saying in that article. But I'm not influenced by Russia, so obviously you can have these same thoughts without being...
We can't say that. Neither of us can say that. Because we are in the middle...
I'm not a Russian agent. I have no ties to Russia other than I know a couple Russian words. I like the language.
But America is, our entire country is under an attack of psyops.
Yeah,
okay?
we constantly have other
massive amounts of information being dumped into our social environments that is a mix of truth and lie and outright. There's misinformation and there's disinformation.
Yeah.
And neither of us are quite sure which one's which in our heads.
Yeah.
So you very well may be regurgitating Russian propaganda unwittingly. I might be. I don't know. It's hard to be sure not. But the reason I mentioned the ad by Trump after he got back from his trip to Moscow, is that it's possible that he wasn't just vacationing, but meeting with government agents, wittingly or unwittingly, finding somebody who has a massive ego and is morally flexible, and plants the seeds for future political actions. And as this went on, we get into the signed contract for Trump Tower Moscow. His signature is on a Russian application to build Trump Tower Moscow. And you know that you can't build that in Moscow without the Russian mafia giving it its blessing. So now we've got the situation where he'll shit on Canada, Greenland, Panama, Obama, all of Europe, but never said one negative thing about Putin. He doesn't criticize. He doesn't call him cute names. Why doesn't he have a nickname for Putin?
I mean, does he have a nickname for Xi Jinping? I mean, there's a lot of people he doesn't have nicknames for.
Yeah, he doesn't have nicknames for people he likes. He gives nicknames to people he wants to shit on.
You think he likes Xi Jinping? He respects him, but I mean, I would say
I could only speculate but the pattern is there.
Trump is harder on China than other recent presidents. Wouldn't you agree?
Harder on China.
Like, okay,
I don't know, man.
China has been stealing.
Didn't he make his daughter the ambassador in China, and then she got a humongous contract?
I don't know.
I don't have it in front of me, but
I mean, that wouldn't be not being hard on China. I mean, that could be corruption if that's the case.
That is what I'm talking about.
I mean,
because everything's transactional with him. Everything.
Yeah, I mean, that's how a lot of people are. Though.
That is a morally repugnant position, and we have what appears to be a morally repugnant person making decisions for what happens with our tax dollars and what happens to our citizens, our visa holders and green card holders, people that are here legally, that are being swept up by ICE agents and then denied due process.
I'm very critical of those things.
I'm extremely concerned.
Due process is very important, and we need to respect that. But
yeah,
what I'm getting at is I believe insisting that Trump is a Russian agent and that you somehow see this crime of being a Russian agent existing, that intelligence agencies, I mean, like, you only have access to public information, right? These intelligence agencies have access to all of that and then some. Like, they've spied on Trump's campaign. They've listened in on his calls. They've done everything. They've looked into everything. So why should we keep entertaining the possibility that private citizens with access to only public information are right, and somehow the intelligence agencies that have basically unlimited resources can't find evidence to corroborate that? They can't find evidence of him being a Russian agent, but somehow people who have adopted this narrative, and that's what it is a narrative. And I want to talk about narratives too.
Oh yeah, cool. Because he's not that bad of a guy is also a narrative.
Yeah,
everything is a narrative. Everything is a story. The only way that we understand reality is if we can understand a story about it. My sense of ego is a story. Who I am is a story.
I believe narratives have the same flaw that labels do. Is once you have a narrative of something, you're looking through that lens. So if you adopt the narrative that Trump is a Russian agent in 2016, when that narrative starts forming, then everything starts to be viewed through that lens. So you filter out information that doesn't agree.
I've been suspicious
Yeah.
of this for, since Russia, if you're listening, I've been suspicious of this.
Yeah.
And as I've been watching for this, it appears that there is a lot of oddly valuable decisions that he's making for Russian largesse, I guess. The things that he's doing benefits Russia, shitting on NATO, saying that putting out the idea that Russia is that Ukraine is the aggressor. No, it's not. They're not the aggressor.
I don't know if he said Ukraine is the aggressor, but Ukraine has made peace talks difficult. Zelensky, the reality is when there is a war like this,
these proxy wars.
The more powerful entity is likely to get some concessions from the other side. So Zelensky's trying to negotiate from a position of weakness. He's basically using the United States to say, I have this power. I have the United States backing me. And Trump's like, no, we need this war to end. We can't keep putting money into it. And we need peace. I can understand like disliking the way that he's gone about peace. I didn't love certain things that happened in the Oval Office with Zelensky and stuff like that. But I do think that
was disgraceful. That was absolutely disgraceful. When did you say thank you? Did he just ask the president of another country if he was grateful enough? And you go back and look.
That was Vance, actually.
He was, right? And there were true, but there were tons of tweets of Zelensky thanking the U.S. that he's done it many times. But then to say, well, how come you're not wearing a suit after they had that effing clown Musk?
That was a reporter. That wasn't Trump or Vance. That's a reporter.
They piled on. Did Trump rush to his aid and say that's inappropriate? No, he did not. Did Vance chime in and say that's not how we treat guests? No, those a-holes piled on and were gleeful about it, trying to embarrass him. I thought that was disgusting, and I was so embarrassed for how he was treated on live TV in the Oval Office as a guest. I can't.
I mean, he was cutting off the president while trying to talk. Like, he was talking over the president. I think both parties had some bad behavior in that instance. I think
Trump is not known for being a listener.
I don't know if I completely agree with that, but the thing is, it's really hard to. I disagree that narratives guide everything. That everything is narrative.
Okay.
Because you can look at facts and determine something. So, like, and I want to go back a second.
Facts without a narrative are just numbers. Data is not a narrative.
Well, facts can be more than numbers, but yeah.
You're going to have to put the facts together to tell a story.
Yeah, but you don't have to tell a story. You can look at things in isolated like you can take things in context and look at information and take it in. The problem with a narrative is, and this is actually something I don't think you were like trying to, I don't think you were consciously saying, I want to narrate, I want Artie to put this in a narrative, but you said, at one point in our conversation, you said, so you think Trump is a businessman who is kind of a victim. You said something like that.
Yeah, is that correct? Did I mischaracterize it? I don't.
Yeah. That's not a narrative I buy into. Like the right has this. Some people on the right have a narrative that Trump is like the only guy who can save the. Not a narrative I buy into.
No, that's the hallmark of a cult, is to have a leader who solves their problems. But I would like to.
It's also the hallmark of a cult to have a bad guy that is the reason for all of their problems.
I mean, yeah, it's hard to go on a moral crusade without an enemy.
Yeah. And I mean, like 1984, right? You have to have an enemy.
We've always been at war with East Asia.
Yeah. Even though they were an ally yesterday, we're at war with them always, right? Like you have to create an enemy, and that So I believe that many people on the left exaggerate the concerns about Trump, and there's people on the right that downplay them.
Well, what would you like people on the left to understand better there?
I don't know. Here's the thing. I'm not like this guy who has all the Trump facts, and I'm not trying to convince everyone that Trump is a good guy or anything.
Right.
The reality is he's democratically elected for the next, he's in office for the next 3 years, 9 months. And that's not likely to change, at least until midterms, and Democrats might take majority and they might impeach him. And hopefully, if that happens, I hope it's for legitimate reasons and not like the things that we've seen in the past, because I think some of those impeachments were kind of a sham. I mean, impeaching a president...
His own party agreed to impeach him.
Some people in the House? Is that what you mean?
Yeah. The House agreed to do it. Senate didn't convict, but barely. And I think it was a 2/3 majority situation too.
Yeah, I think... So I don't think it was barely. I think
almost hit a really high bar to be... He was impeached twice, but then he almost hit the bar to be removed from office. But there's...
I don't think he got too close. I would imagine it was probably like 53 to 47, somewhere around there.
Don't forget, man. Tons of the Republicans in Congress and in the Senate were there on January 6th. Mitch McConnell, Hawley, running for their effing lives and scared to death.
Yeah.
Pence should have been scared to death because they were ready to hang the vice president. The mob was ready to do that, and they erected a noose.
Yeah, I get that.
Peaceful my ass.
Wait, who's saying it was peaceful?
Sorry, that was a crossover to a... this is what I have heard January 6th characterized as a peaceful walk around the Capitol.
Well, there are a lot of videos of people walking within the ropes and stuff. Like, there were a lot of people being peaceful within the Capitol.
Sure.
Even the he was like the one that was focused, the shaman guy.
Yeah.
Even he didn't really do anything violent.
They shat in the Capitol and smeared it around. These people.
That sounds like one person did that, right?
It seems like we could get evidence on that one. And
DNA,
no. Right?
Like, I'm not going to argue. I would never try to say that people on January 6th didn't commit crimes. There definitely were people. But there were also the majority of people there that day did not commit any crimes. And I don't believe that people who were let into the Capitol by police committed crimes. You know, it's hard to say. Like,
time out. Did you say let into the Capitol by police?
Yeah, there's video of it. Yeah.
And what about the ones who smashed in the windows and stuff?
Again, anyone who committed violence should be condemned.
Yes, but let's be clear. By saying that they were let into the Capitol by police.
Some people.
Be clear about that, because many people smashed their way in and injured and hurt people on the way to lynch the vice president.
And then other people were yelling at Capitol Police saying, why aren't you doing something about these people being violent? Right?
That's a credit to those people.
So it seems like the desire is for people, this is narrative again. People, if it is politically expedient for you or for somebody, they want to say it was just it was a violent insurrection, even though no one got charged with insurrection. It was a pretty lame insurrection if it was an insurrection, which it wasn't. Like, people left their guns at home and committed an insurrection. Like, if there was an insurrection, people should have bought their weapons, you know?
Artie,
and I know a few people did.
Artie, I'm so sorry to contradict you on this, but Trump wanted the magnetometers removed so that the people who were armed could come into the crowd. He requested
the removal. He requested more police presence at the Capitol that day.
So I believe that is an untrue statement that he actually did issue. He did say that he did that. What I'm saying is he didn't.
I'm pretty sure there's Capitol Police that have. I think the chief of the Capitol Police or somebody like that.
They knew it was coming. They knew it was going to be dangerous, and there were not nearly enough people there. And then when things got out of hand, he sat on his hands for hours, sitting in the kitchen and throwing ketchup. His daughter was begging him. His sons were begging him. Every one of his aides, the vice president, I think McConnell called him. Pelosi called. I think a bunch of people called and said, "You need to take action." And he sat on his hands for hours because he was hoping that by getting in there and interrupting the proceedings and preventing the certification of the election that happens on January 6th, that he would be able to kick the can far enough down the road to invalidate via fake state electors the democratically elected results in this country for who should be president. And he had every intention of staying in the Oval Office, as far as I can tell, because that's why that date was planned. He tweeted, "Be there January 6th, will be wild." This was an orchestrated attempt at overthrowing the government by him and his clowns, guys like Roger Stone and who's the InfoWars guy? Bannon, Jones, Bannon, and don't forget what a piece of shit Roger Stone is. Is that huge tattoo of Nixon on his back? Did you know that?
Yeah, I think I might have seen that before.
And all three of these guys were saying way before January 6th that all he has to do is declare himself the winner and then delay long enough till people believe it. That was the plan. In like October, before the election, you can hear I think it's Alex Jones, saying that, yeah, he's just going to do whatever the hell he wants. And yeah,
I don't know how close Alex Jones and Donald Trump are. Like, you have to remember that these personalities...
He invited him to speak at the Capitol on January 6th.
Are you sure about that?
Yes, he was there and he was leading people around.
Because Trump...
Or was it Alex Jones, Steve Bannon? One of them left to not be in the area.
I believe Alex Jones was definitely there, but I don't think he was near Trump. I think he was by the Capitol building, and Trump's speech was at the Washington Monument, which is about a 30-minute walk.
It's a long walk.
Violence at the Capitol building, people started breaking in before Trump's speech was done, like well before it was done. There's this narrative that Trump's speech led to the Capitol break-in, which is hard to believe considering the violence started before he was done speaking.
Here, look, this is a narrative, and here's why I think
this is logistics.
No, I'm telling you, this is a narrative, and here's the proof in the pudding. They erected that hangman's noose. They came with plans to do this. They came with plans to threaten. Whoever erected the noose at the Capitol to hang Mike Pence.
But who is it?
Hang on.
This matters because
yes, it does. But the point is, they brought the stuff there. It was not a spontaneous attack of the Capitol. It was planned.
I understand that.
Oh, okay.
The problem is, they is ambiguous. So who is they? And does they mean Trump is involved?
Yes, and it's because he is a stochastic terrorist.
He's a stochastic terrorist.
Yes. He incites terror by proxy. That's a stochastic terrorist. He doesn't do the dirty work. He gets his loyal underlings to do the dirty work. So things like, Russia, if you're listening, this is plausibly deniable. Well, he just said a thing. When really, he is actually inviting the behavior that he wants. He's encouraging the behavior that he wants. January 6th will be wild. He put that out into the ether and saw it happen. And you have to just look at the organizers, the people who got the permits to gather at the Capitol that day. Patel was there, and a whole bunch of others that are now in his inner circle helped organize this. That is the they.
There's one guy that organized most of it, and he's not in the administration at all.
No. The whole shitload of these guys met at the Willard Hotel on January 5th, and it was the thing that Hawley and Green and I think McConnell and a bunch of others reached out to Trump for preemptive pardons for that meeting on January 5th. It included the Proud Boy guys. It included the Praetorian guys. It included Alex Jones and Roger Stone, Trump, and a bunch of others. Just look at who was at the Willard Hotel on January 5th. That's the they.
So those people also put a noose. Those people that met there also put a noose by the Capitol.
No. I'm saying that this is, we're talking about stochastic terrorism, right?
Stochastic terrorism sounds like something you can't prove really well. It's just something, it's a narrative.
That may be the case.
Yeah.
And it's a real thing. So, and I think I was wrong about, it's not the Willard Hotel on January 5th, but it was December 21st at the White House where they met. There was Ken Powell was the lawyer who helped architect the direction that this went. And after that meeting, a bunch of those folks wanted a preemptive pardon because their plan was to overthrow the results of the election and try and claim that it was all legal. That's why they put out all the fake electors. That's why he called Georgia and these other places, because he was trying to cheat to win. And he came within a mouse's fart of succeeding.
I don't think it got very close to succeeding. I mean, the election was going to be certified. They delayed the certification. The rioting delayed it. It wasn't going to stop it.
That was the point. They needed to buy time to push the fake electors through so that they could claim illegitimate results. All they had to do was buy time. And the Constitution lays out when these things are supposed to happen. The election happens the second Tuesday in November, and certification by so many days, and then there's all this process, and it's almost all formality.
Yeah.
And Pence signing off on the election results is just a formality, and they tried to use that because it's a constitutional requirement as a way to interrupt the proceeding and the official designation of who the next president was going to be. This was extremely calculated. And so by putting this out there, the Proud Boys and the First Amendment Praetorians, all those guys, super into all this stuff. And they wanted to kill Mike Pence.
I don't disagree that people wanted to. I don't think there's any evidence that
you're
Trump
saying
wanted.
Some random person decided to bring a whole bunch of lumber to erect a platform with a rope on it to hang Mike Pence? How did that get there? That's a great question.
Well, I mean, yeah, I didn't even know about this noose, but I mean, saying there's a noose there and they did it, but you can't tell me who they are. So what am I supposed to do with that?
Because they are the organizers that have ways for getting into Parler and the 4chan and the seedy underbellies of the internet to get people worked up and into a tizzy. Let me see if I can find that.
I don't disagree that people got worked up and people committed crimes on January 6th. It's just, when I'm listening to you, you said this is what Trump was hoping for. He wanted this. And that was some 2x4, like it was a wooden thing. So I'd imagine that was like 7 feet tall, 4 feet wide. This is an approximation based on what I'm seeing, right?
Yeah. From a very brief glance.
Yeah.
An image. Okay. So
I don't know what the significance of that would be.
Looking at these.
People bring props to riots and stuff like that all the time,
I want you to just consider how heavy a 4x4 beam is. Just consider it for a second.
Yeah, I said 3 or 4 people could easily move that though. And 3 or 4 people is not
had to go to Home Depot, put it in their trunk, haul it, clear the shit to Washington D.C., assemble it on site.
Yeah.
Unplanned? Spontaneous?
People do this all the time though.
No, they don't. They don't do this.
Massive rallies, protests, anything like that. People design elaborate things to bring all the time.
Sure, but
without any coordination from the people organizing.
Where did they get the idea to hang Mike Pence? Where did that come from?
I don't know. Did it come from Trump?
I think it came from that orbit. It probably came from Roger Stone, specifically, because he labels himself a political rat fucker.
That's fine, but if we're going evidence, like saying I think it came from this, like without any evidence, it's just okay. That's an opinion.
Well, you know? I appreciate that, but again, the individuals who met at the White House on December 21st, and then again at the Willard Hotel on January 5th, is the evidence you're talking about, because they are organizing a campaign that had violent thoughts ahead of time and then stormed the Capitol before Trump even unleashed them.
Yeah.
And he almost got he actually had an altercation with his driver who refused to take him to the Capitol.
That's been refuted by many people.
Sure. People refute.
It's kind of an absurd story, right? Like Trump, what is he going to do? He's going to attack his driver and be like, you're going to drive me to this place and I'm going to stay president. Like I don't know.
People refute that the earth is a sphere as well, but the existence of refutation is not the same thing as it didn't happen.
Yeah, but the existence of an allegation isn't evidence of something
That's fair,
too.
but there were, as I understood it, several witnesses to this, and
How many witnesses could there be in a car?
How many do you need?
Well, I mean, if there were several witnesses, who are these witnesses? Because I believe the driver says that didn't happen. So who are these witnesses? And I believe the driver would probably be the best person to tell you, did Trump try to grab you or anything like that? No. Okay.
Okay.
So who are these witnesses? Because sometimes, especially around people like Trump or in politics, you get people who claim they saw something who weren't even there.
Now, I grant you that the story about the car and him grabbing the driver, let's say that that's just a narrative.
Yeah.
Maybe it happened, maybe it didn't. Not sure.
Yeah.
But this is not the only thing like this to come out. Was the ketchup on the wall at the White House?
I don't know about the ketchup. What is the ketchup?
He was so angry that they were not successful that he flung a bottle of ketchup.
Mike Pence didn't decide to not certify. He was pissed at that. But honestly, being pissed at that isn't evidence that he wanted a violent insurrection.
You're
that's
right.
That's not evidence that he's mad that Mike Pence didn't go along with a plan that's actually, as much as we might not like it, he was trying to use the Constitution to stay in power.
And what did Mike Pence tell him?
He said no, he couldn't do it.
Because?
I don't remember his reason. And then they changed it. Now that can't happen again. So because now it's they've clarified that it's a ceremonial role for vice presidents.
I would like, can we ask ChatGPT what Mike Pence said to Trump when he refused to invalidate the election, or when he I
think he said he didn't believe it was his constitutional right to do so, or something along those lines.
And that it would have been flying in the face of the will of the people.
Yeah.
That it was cheating.
Yeah.
Who was pressuring him to cheat?
Well, Trump wanted him to do it.
You're kidding. I'm being snarky. Of course it was Trump.
But, okay, do you think Trump thought the election was stolen?
Yes. Well,
okay. Okay.
Hold on.
If he thought the election was stolen, he wasn't trying to cheat.
Allow me to clarify what I mean by that. He has known since early November of, was it 2019? That he lost that election. He knew it, and he asked people about it. He asked his lawyers about it, and he asked all the knuckleheads around him, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And Bill Barr and was it Sidney Powell and Eastman? John Eastman was LDS guy, as it turns out. John Eastman was the architect of how to use these events to cheat to win, and Pence had too much of a conscience to fall for it. Why? Because there is an extraordinarily long pattern here of a man who is willing to cheat anybody to win, to serve his ego, to serve his pocketbook, and to serve his ongoing future interests. And he doesn't care if they're dictators or monsters, as long as he comes out looking good, making more money. And because he's wholly transactional and decades worth of this behavior, it is not a stretch to think that he might have grabbed a driver for not doing something that he wanted to have happen. So these things don't exist.
Again, what is grabbing a driver going to do?
If the driver was going to drive him back to the White House because it wasn't safe to go to the Capitol, but Trump wanted to go to the Capitol to be with everybody, it would have put him in a very compromising situation for the entire. It would have certainly implicated him directly in January 6th if he had gone to the Capitol.
Yeah, again, I would need evidence. I would need some real evidence that he did this with the driver. And the fact that it's been refuted by people who were definitely there is evidence that it likely didn't.
What I'm saying is, whether or not that particular driver's story is true, it fits a pattern of behavior from him where he is impatient, he is cruel, and he is willing to allow others to do violence on his behalf.
The violence on his behalf, what are some other examples of that? Because it's a pattern.
Look at what's going on with everybody in America who is an undocumented worker, a visa holder, a green card holder, and even now American citizens. He doesn't seem to care that an innocent man was taken to a concentration camp in another country, and then just throws up his hand and says, well, there's nothing I can do in the face of the economic and political might of El Salvador.
This is okay, but I mean, surely what he is claiming might not be true, but the claim is that this guy was MS-13. This was supposedly...
We'd know if there was due process.
Yeah, supposedly this was determined by courts. Not just by Trump. This isn't Trump saying this guy's MS-13. There's courts.
That's a lie, and he's a lying sack of poo.
You're absolutely sure that that's a lie.
That's a lie. Well, and now we have to make sure we're talking about the same effing guy, but let me
the guy who was sent to El Salvador, and the El Salvador president.
There's not a guy. There's dozens,
there's
maybe
one
hundreds.
guy, his last name I think is Garcia, but I'm not sure. This guy who was sent to El Salvador, and the El Salvadorian president was in our White House recently. And they asked him if he would send him back, and he said, no, he's a terrorist. He's not coming back.
And he's not a terrorist. That is an unfounded allegation what do you mean the court said? We didn't get due process. He was whisked off to a foreign country in the middle of the night with no charges.
No, okay. So my understanding, and I could be wrong about this, I haven't looked into the case, but my understanding is there were other court issues with that guy. I think there was like a domestic violence case or something like that with his fiance or wife or something like that. And it was determined at that time that he was MS-13. I believe he has a tattoo that only MS-13 people have.
He doesn't have tattoos. Well, again, it's tricky because I'm not certain we're talking about the same guy, but I want to see if I can...
If you're talking about the guy who got deported because of his... Here's something I'm very critical of Trump. There are people who are being punished for being anti-Semitic, and as much as I don't like anti-Semitism, being punished for distasteful views is not a crime. Like, I mean, having
so if you're a college student and you're trying to speak out about Palestine,
yeah, I don't think that's a crime. Like, it's not a crime,
and this is being allowed under his administration.
Yeah,
he knows it's happening and goes,
free speech.
He's brown, it's fine.
Free speech has been violated by the last few presidents too. So there is a pattern there that free speech is not quite free, which I don't agree with. Free speech is free speech. Like, free speech should be free speech and respected. And I think that's a problem.
So there was one of the senators that is in the jurisdiction of the guy that got whisked off. Oh, yeah. Kilmar. Oh, I'm sorry, I don't have my glasses on. Kilmar Abrego Garcia. Just so we're clear, everybody calling Kilmar Abrego Garcia a terrorist or a gang member are lying, repeating it for the purposes of confusing people. Don't follow this stuff closely to him.
What are you reading?
That's the guy right there.
But what are you reading?
This is it's just Blue Sky.
So it's like a tweet. Somebody tweeting about it.
It's the first example I found that had the guy's name.
But this is something in politics, and this is why I'm not going to act like I know the details of this case, but I'm also not going to read somebody's opinion about it and act like their opinion is right just because I agree with it.
No, I mean, this wasn't the first one I saw this morning, but let's see if we can find a Kilmar Abrego.
And this is the thing. These are valid criticisms of Trump. These are things that should be discussed. I think talking about him being a Russian agent is kind of like a distraction from that, because it's something like, okay, if there's evidence of him being a Russian agent, give me the evidence.
There's
but again,
lots.
But why? Please explain to me, if there is so much evidence that I should be aware of, why didn't the CIA and FBI charge him with anything? They wanted to get him. I think that is incontrovertible. They wanted to pin something on him. Like, that's why the obstruction of justice charge was proposed by Mueller, is they wanted something to pin to him. But even Mueller, they looked into him and they couldn't find any evidence. So if the most elite intelligence agencies,
they didn't find evidence that convinced you, but they did, and there are ties.
They didn't find evidence to convince themselves or anybody. The only people that believe this are people who believed it before they saw any evidence.
Convince themselves?
They didn't find evidence to justify any criminal charges.
Wrong. The Mueller report was not there to determine the criminal charges.
We already asked ChatGPT on our last interview, and it agreed with this. There was no evidence. It said outright, there was no evidence of Russian collusion by the Trump administration. None. So, okay, what can prove, is this a narrative that no evidence can break through and dissuade you from? Or is it something that's...
There is a very long pattern of self-interested behavior.
I get that that's how you feel. But at the same time, I'm not talking about patterns. I don't give a shit about pattern. This is a crime we're talking about. There has to be evidence of a crime, not I see a pattern and I believe that pattern suggests that he's a Russian agent. He was investigated for this stuff. He was never charged. They found no evidence of Russian collusion. So why should I believe this pattern that you're seeing over the FBI and CIA investigating and then finding nothing?
You know his nickname is the Teflon Don, right?
Yeah, but again, let's try to get away from narrative, focus on evidence. Why didn't the FBI and CIA find the evidence to charge him for the crime that you insist he's guilty of and that you know he's guilty of, and they investigated with more information than you have access to? Good. Why didn't they charge him with anything? Why didn't they find any evidence of this thing that you say is basically an absolute truth?
Okay, so this is helpful. This is where a Facebook conversation gets too messy, right?
Yeah, because we are I love you.
Of course, I'm passionate, right?
We are passionate about it, and we're going to argue, right?
So, and I like that we're just talking through, because I'm not angry or upset. I do feel passionate, right?
Yeah, I'm passionate. I'll get
But I disagree with the premise of your question, because you say, what is the evidence for this crime he committed? And that on absolute terms. But I have not made that claim, and I'm not saying that this is the crime this is the crime right here that he did. What I'm saying is there is a pattern of appalling behavior from this guy and the people who surround him that lead me to question his integrity, his morals, and a pattern of serving himself and his ego at every turn without any exception that I can ever find.
I understand that, and
so I'm very suspicious, and I cannot believe that you're not more suspicious of his motives, because he is.
I'm suspicious of his motives, in certain contexts, for sure.
What context? I mean, is there, in what domain would you trust that guy?
So would you? I mean, obviously, more people trusted Donald Trump than they trusted Kamala Harris.
That's the appeal to the majority. I don't give a shit.
Yeah, and that's fine. I'm just saying, obviously, people do trust that he was a better person to be president than Kamala Harris. Yeah, I do actually. I mean, appeal to majority is whatever, but I respect our democracy. I believe that if the American people elect Donald Trump to be president, for better or for worse, that is our president.
Agreed.
And I believe that if the Democrats somehow gain control of Congress and decide to impeach him, and it's bullshit, it's just the same crap that it always has been, I believe that is actually a threat to democracy.
And if it's not bullshit,
if it is not bullshit,
don't they have a right and an obligation to stop the antics that are? Look, he thumbed
a right and an obligation to stop antics.
Yeah, look, you mentioned 1984. And at the very beginning of 1984, he starts out, Winston. His job is to clean up articles and put them down the memory hole.
Yeah.
The second Musk started taking control of stuff in the White House with Trump, they started taking down information, reports, anything that references confirmation bias, transgender.
I get that.
And taking them from, we're talking about thousands of reports taken down from federal resources, from federal sources that we all paid for. And he took it down with a laundry list of political no-no words.
Yeah.
Because memory.
And some of them is absurd. They remove Jackie Robinson stuff. Yeah.
This is the memory hole. This is an Orwellian thing of him to do. One of the first things he pulls down is the Consumer Protection Bureau. It's gone. It does not exist now. Yeah. If your credit card company screws you over, tough shit.
They don't actually do anything. I've tried to use the consumer what is it? CFP, right?
Yeah.
I've gone to them for something. I find out they don't actually investigate individual claims. They look for patterns, and if they can establish a pattern, then they start looking into something.
That's gone too.
Yeah, okay.
And if you're trying to improve government efficiency, why is his first target an agency that was investigating his companies for those patterns, worker abuses and dangerous working conditions, and bypassing norms for things like OSHA and just basic safety stuff? He was being investigated by them, and as soon as he got the power, he defunded them, and the investigations into his bad behavior.
You're talking about
stopped.
Elon Musk,
yeah?
Right now, right? Okay, we're kind of going all over the place, and we're kind of. What I see happening is we're kind of shifting between things.
So these are the antics I'm talking about. Is stuff like this: people being shipped off without due process. These are antics.
and obviously the courts have had to step in there as needed.
And then when the Supreme Court ruled 9-0 against him, he thumbed his nose at him and he did it anyway.
Well, I have to recall what they ruled on.
The Supreme Court told him that they couldn't ship that guy to El Salvador. He was in the air when the court issued that ruling, and Trump said, "Nope, I'm not going to bother."
Yeah,
which means the balance of power is being undermined by someone who's making a very aggressive power grab.
Well, and that has to be addressed for sure. What I am, you said you had a problem with the premise of my question.
Oh,
and
yeah,
but then you started saying you see this pattern of cruelty and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I'm specifically talking about your claim that he's a Russian agent. That is a crime. That isn't some pattern or something like that. That is a crime, and that crime has been thoroughly investigated.
So
can you answer that question? Like, why do you believe that crime exists and the FBI doesn't agree, and the CIA doesn't agree, and NSA doesn't agree, and Mueller doesn't agree?
So
why do you, with only public information, see your opinion on this as more? I don't know. Like you see, you think you see something more than they do.
So, again, with the framing of your question, I object to it.
Do you think Trump's a Russian agent?
Hold on, I want to go back. I don't think it is accurate to say that the FBI, the CIA, and the NSA all disagree that he has ties to Russia.
Ties to Russia isn't the crime. Russian agent is what we're talking about.
Fine.
He has ties to Russia, no doubt.
So yes, but what you've said there is that the FBI, the CIA, and the NSA have all agreed that he's not a Russian agent, and that's not true.
They invested Russian collusion.
So what
they found none.
No.
But they did. Like we asked.
No.
We asked ChatGPT though.
Artie, if you want my answer, you're gonna have to let me talk.
Yeah, please. Sorry.
There is a world of difference between having evidence of a crime and the ability to convict based on that evidence.
Okay.
They're not the same.
Okay.
So a failure to get a conviction is not the same as saying that there's no evidence. Do you agree?
They didn't even pursue charges because they're okay. So you know how crimes work, right?
But answer the question. Just because there isn't a conviction doesn't mean the person didn't commit a crime. That's not the same.
Sure, yeah. People can commit crimes that they're not caught
that they get. Thank you. This is the situation that I think the FBI, the CIA, and the NSA and the Democrats in Congress found themselves in. It's not to say that there was no evidence. You keep saying that, but that's not correct. There wasn't, I guess, enough to convict.
They didn't even charge. There wasn't even enough to charge. And you'd barely need any evidence to charge somebody with a crime. You don't even need evidence to charge somebody with a crime. So you're saying they didn't convict, they didn't charge. They didn't even make the claim that any evidence exists.
And who would file those charges? Whose responsibility is that?
It'd be the FBI. It'd be Mueller. The reason, I would imagine the reason
Why wasn't it Mueller?
Because he didn't have the evidence.
Wrong.
What was his evidence?
No, hold on. The reason Mueller didn't charge anything is because he was explicitly prohibited from doing so. His job was to generate the report, hand it to Congress, and let them do it. But they're full of Mitch McConnells who get in the way of everything, and nothing ever came of it. That's not to say there wasn't evidence in there. It's just once he handed it over, because that was his job, they didn't do anything with it. It is wrong to say that Mueller didn't convict because he didn't have evidence. That is fundamentally misunderstanding what his job was for that report.
He didn't charge.
He was forbidden from charging.
He didn't even make a case for charging him for Russian collusion. He didn't even. I'm so confused because we asked ChatGPT about this in our last conversation. Yeah. Did we hear different things?
So almost certainly.
But what did you hear?
Did you remember? Like we were talking earlier. It was maybe before we started recording. How difficult it is to talk about things because I take an idea and I have to turn it into words and then like spit them out of my mouth and then you hear them and interpret those words. But my words were distorted to begin with because ideas and words aren't perfectly aligned, right? I have to distill a thought into a verbal description. So it's distorted.
Yeah.
By the time I turn it into words. And when I hand you that information, you put it in your head, you now have to reconstruct my thought from those words. So when we both hear some words come spoken, what we hear can be dramatically different.
I understand that. And this is why I'm being a stickler and trying to keep bringing it back, because I say, what's the evidence? And then you'll start talking about, well, there's this pattern of cruelty and stuff like that. I'm like, I'm not talking about your perception of him as a person. I'm saying, what is the evidence that he is a Russian agent? What is this evidence that Congress ignored?
I don't know how to really explain this in a way that I don't say there's a pattern, but I need you to hear me out here. He went to Russia and became suddenly politically active, or at least much more politically active. The substance of that full-page ad that he took out in 1987, the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, and the Washington Post, breaks down what is pretty definitively Russian state propaganda, right?
Hang on, is propaganda? Can propaganda be true?
Yeah, I suppose so.
Because,
but I mean, information that serves Russian political interests against the U.S. and the rest of the world.
Let's focus on this for a second, because his criticisms of the Marshall Plan were based on reality, right? We have been giving these countries money ever since World War II. That is correct, right? That was the Marshall Plan, right?
Yes.
It seems like, sure, that might be something that Russia cares about.
I love it.
But isn't that something that Americans can care about too?
I fucking love it. So what you're pointing to is evidence, and what I am pointing to is the narrative.
The evidence is needed to convict a crime, not narrative, right?
This is not the question I'm answering. Okay. What was in the substance of that ad was politically expedient for Russia that pitted America's allies against each other, so our enemies aren't laughing at us. That was the gist of his letter.
Yeah.
Of his ad. Then, Russia, if you're listening, when he first starts to announce what his political platform is, once he's secured the GOP nomination in 2015, you go on the first press event or whatever, and he's taking questions from a large audience. And one of the people that he takes a question from is a woman named Maria Butina. And in it, she asks a question related to, I think, Crimea or whatever, that leads the president to the president-elect to go on to completely revamp the GOP's platform on as it relates to, I think, Russia and Ukraine, out of the blue. Eventually, we find out that Maria Butina is a Russian agent, was planted there, and he picked her for her question, and then took a hard right turn with the GOP's entire foreign policy platform.
Did he know for sure that she was a Russian agent?
How would I know that?
I mean, it would be an important detail, right?
One among many. The Trump Tower, Moscow, the connection of Manafort and Patel and a bunch of these other guys to other influential Russias inside Russia. He has been to Moscow. He has met with Putin. His daughter went to Moscow and sat in Putin's chair in his office.
Yeah.
They are, there is a lot.
I didn't know about that. I mean, I'd have to look into that, but.
Yeah, he's sat in Putin's chair in his office.
Yeah. So this is the problem, though. All of that stuff is reason to look into things, right?
Yeah.
When
you say, well, where is the evidence that he's a Russian agent? What I'm saying is that there is a pattern that shows, even when he speaks about Russia and the sanctions that he dismantles, and the way he mollycoddles Putin. He seems to be quite afraid of him because he will mock and tear down anybody he doesn't like mercilessly.
Yeah.
I can only imagine he must fear Putin.
I mean, I think he considers him an adversary. Like I said last time, I think...
Why do you think Trump considers Putin an adversary?
Because he is an adversary.
I know that, you know that, but nothing about Trump's behavior suggests that.
Why? I mean, he had tougher sanctions on Russia than Obama did.
I mean, I don't know what to tell you, but what's happened is he's pitted us against Europe, against NATO. He's undermining Russia, undermining the Ukraine in its attack of Russia, and is refusing to allow the funds to go, the congressionally approved money to go to Ukraine, because he didn't think that Zelensky kissed his butt thoroughly enough.
Again, that's
it's part of a pattern.
When things like he didn't think this, like that's kind of a red flag to me whenever somebody is claiming to know
what somebody's. That's fair.
Like, and you've done it a couple times in the conversation, and I've noticed this with Trump. People who really dislike him use language like that all the time, where it's like, well, Trump only cares about himself, so everything he's doing is for himself.
Is there any evidence to the contrary?
Evidence to the contrary, it's a weird question. It's saying evidence to the contrary. So,
does he show empathy for people? Does he enjoy allowing others to have the spotlight? Does he does he think about what other people are going through and what it's like for them? It's always this inward looking.
He's definitely somebody I wouldn't want to hang out with. I wouldn't want to, like, as far as I can tell, but also, like, I mean,
he has all the
public
hallmarks.
Persona, and this has been stated by many people, the way he comes off publicly is not the way that he is privately. I have talked to people who have met him and been around him. One of my friends said before Trump was in politics, he went and listened to Trump speak, and Trump's language was completely different than when he was in politics. He used bigger words, stuff like that, and way more articulate. And we saw this with George H.W. Bush, right? He's supposedly a really smart guy, but he dumbs down his language. Politics,
W, right? Not H.W.
Yeah,
W.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, W. So we know people do this in politics. AOC, Hillary Clinton, Hillary Clinton is infamous for having accents at different rallies and stuff like that. AOC has done it. Like, a lot of politicians.
I do it too. I sit around somebody who speaks with an accent and I'll start. I can't help it.
Yeah. So it's just interesting to me that so many people who dislike Trump claim to know what's going on in his head.
I mean, why do you think I dislike him? Is it just like I just have a chip on my shoulder?
I think you have your reasons. No,
right.
I think I don't like Trump. I don't like his personality. My thing is I respect the will of the people. The American people voted for Trump, and they put him into power. So it's like, we can talk about January 6th and what was wrong with there. I have problems with certain things that happened on January 6th. I have tons of issues with Trump, but it's like, what do you want to happen? Do you want him obviously I would imagine you want him to be removed from office, ideally. I
would like our three branches of government to share power appropriately. But right now, although Congress is supposed to hold the purse strings of the Treasury, Trump let some guy in, not an American citizen, who was here illegally when he was in college in the 90s.
Yeah. Wait, who did he let in illegally? Who was let in illegally?
Musk. He didn't come to this country legally. He was here. There's a period of time where he is here in America as an illegal immigrant.
Okay. All right. I mean, I have I have issues with Musk too. Like, if I'm going to say this about Trump, my opinion of Trump is to be determined. I've read enough about U.S. presidents to know that the impact of a presidency is usually not understood during that presidency. It's usually afterward, where we actually understand, some things that seem good in the moment are bad later on, and some things that are bad in the moment are good later on. Trump, like, my opinion of him, I have an opinion of him, but a lot of it is to be determined. If we're 3 years later and we haven't gotten the Epstein files, that is a big stain on Trump.
You're not kidding.
If there are claims of fraud and abuse.
How is it not already out? I'd like to know.
Yeah, it should be. And it's already, like, what they did with the influencers, with the binders, it was pathetic and disgraceful. Like, that, it was, I question Pam Bondi. I have a lot of questions. And so, like, there's these claims of fraud and abuse and stuff like that. And I do like that ideally some of the fraud and abuse is being addressed financially, but if there is fraud and abuse, we should be seeing criminal charges at some point too, because these are crimes, and that makes it real if people are being charged, right? So just to back up a little, so my opinion of Trump is to be determined. There are a lot of things that I still need to see play out to determine, how favorable I am to his presidency. There are things that I like and things that I don't like. That's going to be the case with any president.
And sure, and that's certainly fair. I think we can agree easily that he's a narcissist.
Yeah, I don't think we've had a president that isn't.
What I understand from others who are psychologists and people who study human behavior, would classify him as a malignant narcissist.
Yeah, I'm not a psychologist. I did interview a psychologist who said that, but I actually think it was unprofessional to do so, because to diagnose somebody with malignant narcissism that you're not actually seeing as a patient is probably borderline medical malpractice.
No, okay, yeah, maybe, but it also doesn't mean it's wrong. Because
but they don't have the access to make that determination.
I disagree, because there's enough footage of him out there interacting with people on and off mic, like when he's not necessarily aware that he's on camera. I read a tweet years ago from, or maybe it was a Reddit post of a teacher of young students, grade school teacher. Yeah. And she said, when Trump reads from the teleprompter, he relies on the same techniques.
Wait, I thought he was illiterate.
Well, I'm almost there.
Okay.
When he reads, he uses the kind of tricks that kids who don't know how to read use to cover up the fact that they don't know how to read. So when you don't know a word, you'll say another word that looks similar or sounds similar, but is the wrong word. And the way he covers up his misspoken statements, and she cites several really fascinating examples. Like he talked about, they were trying to talk about the rocket's red glare and the ramparts and landing the planes at the airports, because he didn't know the words. Oh God, I got to find the exact example. But there are many examples of Trump on camera misspeaking the wrong word, and completely the wrong word, but it's spelled or sounds the same. And he goes on to and say, oh, that's what I meant to say all along. And these are techniques that little kids who don't know how to read yet do.
Yeah.
So yes,
I'm not going to argue this.
He might be minimally literate, but he has not read this many books in his life, I'd bet.
Oh, I don't think he's a reader. I don't think he's illiterate.
How?
If he were illiterate,
No, I don't mean to say that he can't read words.
Yeah.
But he doesn't read words, and he's not any good at it.
I'm pretty sure he's the best with words.
I do the best words.
I have a mug that Holly got me for my birthday. I have to show you at some point.
I feel like we took a tangent somewhere, but I can't remember what it was.
I do want to go back a little bit, and then I want to dive into the narrative thing a little bit because
I want to get to that too.
Okay. Those things that you mentioned, those patterns that you saw with Russia.
Yeah.
Those would be cause to investigate something. I was okay with Trump being investigated for Russian collusion.
Sure.
But that investigation happened and they didn't get anything more. So
they didn't get the conviction.
They didn't make charges.
There were
no charges.
Mueller wasn't supposed to. Congress was.
But there wasn't even, the door wasn't even open for that. The only charge that the door was really open for was obstruction of justice. There was, I mean, if the Mueller report had evidence of Russian collusion, there's no way that wouldn't be used. I mean, you had people, think about Adam Schiff. He got on camera every night saying, there's more than circumstantial evidence here. We have more than circumstantial evidence, but he never provided it. He just created.
Did you not watch the January 6 hearings?
That had nothing to do with Russia. That was the January 6 stuff. And we have to, I'm really trying to stay on the Russia stuff.
Yeah.
The January 6 stuff, there was definitely stuff that happened that was bad, but there was also narratives, distorted narratives relayed by the people on the committee. But I don't want to get into that.
Okay.
Russia, as I said, the patterns that you speak of, sure, that's a reason to look into things. But you don't look into things, find nothing, and then just keep insisting that the pattern is actually the truth and the evidence that doesn't exist is a non-factor and the pattern is more important than the non-evidence.
Well, again, evidence and charges are not always the same thing. But what I think would be maybe worthwhile, we've talked about Seth Abramson before, I think, yeah?
I don't recall Abramson.
He was an attorney for many years, public defender. I think he was a prosecutor as well, very well versed in the law, and he writes prolifically. You can find him on Blue Sky. He dumped Twitter after Elon went crazy, but he's written several full-length books that are very deeply cited, like pages and pages of citations from articles. And he wrote several books. One is called Proof of Collusion. One is called Proof of Corruption. Another is called Proof of Cruelty. And in these, the evidence for these things has been laid out pretty thoroughly, and it's a hell of a read. And it's not speculation. He's citing hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of articles sourced from reliable sources, left and right.
So this guy knows, so he's more intimately knowledgeable about this than the people who investigated it? Because again, my question is, people write books all the time that create narratives that aren't necessarily true, and they have tons of citations to back up their claim.
Members of the January 6th committee followed Seth Abramson and referred to him at times, and know his work, and he has helped influence the shape of those investigations. But I've been following Abramson since about 2015.
Yeah.
And maybe that would be a good side book for us to
I'd be happy to do that.
Read or something, because he does a much better job of laying out the case for Trump's involvement with Russia and Russian oligarchs. I'm not going to try to refute the fact that he has ties to Russian oligarchs. I know he's gotten loans from Russia and stuff like that. But a malignant narcissist who's a raging opportunist with wealthy Russian friends, there's a pattern here that is very concerning.
I
over
understand.
and over and over again, I think. It sure looks like he's up to something shady with the Russians.
The FBI investigated, NSA, CIA, Mueller. Congress had Democratic majority from 2018 to 2020. They never once pursued charges for Russian collusion. I'm not talking about conviction. I'm talking about they didn't even bring up charges.
Okay. Well, let's put that on a shelf.
Okay.
Let's go take a look at it. Maybe we'll get into that for another episode.
Okay.
I didn't come prepared necessarily to get this deep into this, but like looking into Tulsi Gabbard, Manafort, and all those other knuckleheads, that could be a good episode by itself.
Yeah.
Okay. Did you want to get to narrative?
Yeah.
That's a cool topic.
I'm not going to say I'm not narrative driven at all, because I know I am, but I try to look at things. I try intentionally to avoid adopting narratives because I think they're destructive, just like labels. When I listen to our conversation,
is propaganda sometimes true?
Yeah.
So propaganda is a narrative.
It could be. Yeah. It could be a narrative.
Which could be true.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. The narratives that you put forth about Trump were interesting. Sometimes,
as far as I understand it, I don't know for sure.
Yeah. So a couple of them were Trump is illiterate. Trump, his MO is to not pay contractors.
Yeah. Well documented.
Except I looked into this, and it's been about, I think it was less than 5% of the jobs that he's done. So that it's interesting because if you did something, let's
tell me more about that 5%. What are you talking about?
Like
what does
most
that represent?
contractors that he's worked with, he's paid. There's been about 5% that he didn't, or less. I think it was. It might have been 2% or something like that, based on estimates, because it's kind of hard to nail down exactly how many projects he's had or something. But this guy, he's had hundreds of building contracts, and then there has been incidents where he didn't pay people. So if you do something 1 out of 20 times, 1 out of 30 or 40 times, is that an MO?
I've probably driven a dozen cars. I've only stolen one. Am I a car thief?
Sure.
Right.
But is your MO,
correct,
is your modus operandi to steal cars whenever you drive them?
I've never stolen a car, but
I know what you're saying.
I wasn't speeding the whole time is not a very good excuse.
Yeah. That's not what I'm saying. An MO means a pattern of behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Is something happening occasionally a pattern?
I hardly ever punch old ladies in the face. Almost never.
Is your MO
once a month?
You're kind of distorting what I'm saying.
Okay, I don't mean to. Say it again so I can.
Okay.
I want to understand.
Let's see.
Like, how many times do you have to commit a crime for that crime to be a thing, to be your MO? How many times do you have to cheat at cards to be a cheater?
For something to be an MO, it has to be your modus operandi. It's your
way of operating.
Way of operating. So are there reasons to not pay contractors sometimes in jobs?
Yeah, sure.
Like they might be overcharging you. Maybe they didn't do the work.
Late for the work.
There could be legitimate reasons to not pay people.
Yes.
So if you've done 500 jobs and you have 10 that you didn't pay contractors for, is that your modus operandi to not pay your contractors?
Well, let's ask the question in a different way. I want to look at that 5% number you cited.
Yeah.
And when you say that 5% were claiming to be screwed, if that information is a calculation made from the number of contractors that he's worked with and the number that has gone to court with him over a dispute, then the question becomes, is 5% a lot or a little?
Well, I'm specifically talking about modus operandi because...
Well, no, this will tell you. If in America, 10% of contractors screw something up and have to go to court, then 5% is better than normal. But if it's 0.5% and he's got 5% taking him to court, that's an MO.
If it's his MO, why did he pay 95+% of the contractors that he worked with? If the way that he operates is to not pay people, why did he pay most of them? this is what I'm pushing back. I'm like, this is a narrative that it's
when you say when you're saying MO, you're saying that that's what he always does. And clearly, it's not what he always does.
It's a way of operating.
What's the difference between the way of operating and operating in shady ways on occasion? It's not the. I don't.
Well, again, do we know all the details from this?
I don't steal all my cars.
Again, like you're saying that it's a shady thing, but you're also admitting that there could be legitimate reasons not to pay people.
Yes.
Do we know all the details from all these? Do we know exactly why they didn't get paid?
I've read several articles. One that comes to mind is a guy that I think built a piano, like a custom piano for, I don't know if it was his place specifically. And they agreed on a contract price. And the guy delivered the piano as expected. It was beautiful. He worked really hard. And then Trump didn't pay him and had to take him to court. That alone is a nightmare. What a shitty thing to do to somebody. But then
I agree.
Settled in court for way less than the agreed upon price up front.
Yeah.
For a billionaire, what kind of asshole does that?
I'm not going to argue. I don't think, like, if these cases are true, I don't think it was right of him to do that. Again, I don't like a lot of stuff about Trump. I don't like the way that he interacts with people all the time. I don't like the way that he has done business sometimes. At the same time, what I'm pushing back on is the narrative that this is just how he does business, because it's like, well, then if that's how he does business, why doesn't he do it with more people? Like, I do agree that the percentage is probably higher than the average, and I don't like that. At the same time, the number of contracts that he does with people is way higher than the average contractor probably does with people. So there's more contracts to work with.
Yeah, but so that would make that 5% or whatever that number is statistically more relevant, because there's a large sample set of contracts. So the question really is 5% or whatever that number is a lot or a little? Is it an order of magnitude high or low of whatever is commonplace?
But to really get into that and determine if it's some kind of modus operandi, which it doesn't appear to be just based on the numbers, you'd have to say, okay, what is different between the 95+% that he paid and the less than 5% that he didn't pay? What is the difference in those? Like, is there some reason that he didn't pay for them? Like, well, let's be clear. Or does he just randomly say, this guy I'm not going to pay? Let's be clear.
The 5%, and I asked you what that number comes from.
And it might be 2%. I don't know.
That number is extremely important to understand in this context, because there is a world of difference between 5% of the contractors, or 95% of the contractors got paid just fine, and 5% of the contractors had to go to court to get paid.
Yeah.
And maybe, I mean, whether or not, he can be shorting people left and right without doing it 100% of the time.
Yeah.
And my failure to prove 100% of the time does not make him a good guy, right? Like that's
I'm just saying
that's a non sequitur.
Yeah, but left and right again implies kind of like happening all the time. And again, we're talking about.
So I'm not saying that it is happening 100% of the time.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's when you say MO.
Yeah.
It seems to be implying that means 100% of the time.
More often than not. Somebody's modus operandi is like, this is just how they do business. This is what they do.
So it's like to 5% of what? That's what I really want to know is 5%.
And it might be less than, we might be talking 1 or 2%.
Okay. 2% of what?
Of how many contracts.
Where did you get this number?
I was asking ChatGPT. I was like, how many contractors did Trump work with that he didn't pay versus how many contractors has he worked with and paid, something like that. And it couldn't give me an exact answer. It's like estimate, it's like at least 500. I mean, I think it was like 500 projects that he's built and stuff like that. And then there's been a few, several cases of him not paying people for whatever reason. All I'm saying is to say that's his MO.
Well, you're saying that, not me. I mean,
that is what you said in the conversation.
It seems to be a pattern of behavior.
Yeah.
I don't know if that rises to your definition of MO.
Yeah.
But if you're regularly, here's a better example. How many times do you have to bounce from a restaurant skip on the check, not pay, eat and leave, dine and dash. How often does that have to happen for it to be your MO? Once a year? Once a month? Once a week?
I mean, it's a good point. It's a good point.
I pay for most of my meals, but once in a while I'll dine and dash because that can still be your MO without it being the majority of the time. You can still have a propensity for shitty behavior when it suits you without being having that shitty behavior 100% of the time.
Yeah.
I agree with that. Dine and dashing is a shitty thing to do.
Yeah.
Doing it periodically is an MO, even if you're paying for the other 95% of your meals or 98% of your meals. It's still an MO.
Yeah, I can understand that. At the same time, like you might have a couple examples of him not paying people, but we don't know the detail. We don't know the specifics of many of these court cases. Aren't public, so we don't know the
individuals who got screwed sure know the story.
Well, yeah, and obviously they're going to have their version of the story. Have we ever heard Trump's version of these? Like,
yeah, you hear it in court when they settle.
If it's public,
well,
a lot of this stuff is.
It will be public that they settled, not for how much.
Yeah, a lot of this stuff is private, and the details of this stuff is private. All I'm saying is like, I'm weary of something. This is what he does. This is what he does, and it's like we don't know the details of this stuff, and obviously that's not always what he does. Most of the time, everything seems to be pretty smooth in his project.
Are you shitting me? I'm sorry for saying it that way. Trump steaks, Trump vodka, Trump casino.
Failed businesses aren't corruption or any like failed businesses happen all the time. There's 90% of businesses fail, right?
Yeah.
And this is
he's not a good businessman. He's not. He would have made more money if he had just hung on to it. He'd be doing better than what he's been doing with it. He was given $250 million in the 70s.
Oh, I thought it was small. I thought it was $5 million, but I'm sure that it's been.
Oh, maybe that's I don't know. But he was given a substantial amount of money from his apparently pretty racist dad and mother. And I think they were alcoholic. And that's why Trump doesn't drink. Do you know he doesn't drink?
Well, he actually doesn't drink because of his brother, who was an alcoholic.
Well, his parents were too.
I didn't know that.
And if his mother was drinking while pregnant, then he would have had fetal alcohol syndrome, which would have had developmental delays that might lead to things like poor reading and comprehension ability.
Yeah, I don't think Trump is a big reader. I don't think he's illiterate, and because if he was illiterate, if he could not read at all, like if he couldn't read well,
he can't read well, and I think that's beyond dispute.
But I know many intelligent people who decide not to read. They decide to listen to audiobooks or get their information from video and stuff like that. My preference is to read books, and it will always be that as long as I have working eyes. But some people don't learn that way.
I like audiobooks.
I know extremely intelligent people who prefer audiobooks.
I don't sit still well.
I mean, I know people who are dyslexic that I would consider extremely intelligent people. So they can't read like in the traditional sense very well. They don't like to read. Like I have friends that I intentionally don't send them because I have a habit of writing long text.
Yeah.
I have certain friends that I don't send those long text messages to. I will pick up the phone and call them to have a conversation because I know that it's a struggle for them to read. A struggle for them to read. But they're very capable intellectually.
Sure. I was just going to sympathize with you that like even since our last podcast, we started to get into it and text like, oh shit, this is going to go off the rails. We better talk face to face and we'll go much better.
Well, it's hard with us because anyone who has listened to this knows that like we can go from thing to thing. Like it's a struggle to stay on point, like because our minds are just so active and we're like on to the next thing, you know. And it's like, oh, this is something else relevant. Like, yeah.
There's a name for that, you know.
ADHD.
Well, So people with an attention deficit
Yeah.
have very active brains. And the reason that their attention is so short is because they're so distractible.
Yeah.
And the name that they call this is porpoising, where when the porpoise jumps out of the water, that represents the conversation that we all hear.
Yeah.
Once it dives down, it can swim around and the thoughts of our minds will pop up over here.
Yeah.
And seemingly unrelated, but if you followed the trail, you'd see why it came out. And we porpoise a lot.
Yeah. I would love to hear what you would like to see happen. Like, obviously Trump has a lot of supporters. I don't consider myself like a Trump supporter. I'm not somebody who's like advocating for him. I'm more sitting back.
You're reticent to condemn him until you feel the evidence is stronger.
Yeah, like I want to, like,
without stronger evidence, right?
Yeah, like, I mean, the Russian stuff, it's like, I was open to it. Like I said, it's like, but then I just started hearing a lot of promises that didn't result in anything. And it's like, okay, well, come back to me when you got something, you know? And yeah, that's the way I look at it. And like, there's things happening in the administration that I don't like right now. But at the same time, it's like, the question for me, it was never, do you support everything Trump does or do you condemn him? It's like, do I think he would do a better job than Kamala Harris? Yeah, I still think so. I think Kamala Harris was not a good vice president. I think she screwed up the border, and like she
screwed up the border?
Yeah, her and Biden removed a bunch of executive orders that Trump had in place.
Mm-hmm.
And the border situation got out of control.
Did it?
Yeah, we had like 10 million illegal immigrants come across the border.
Did we?
In Biden's years?
I'm skeptical of the wave of people trying to break down the doors to get to America when we're treating people from outside the way we do. The whole problem.
Well, I mean, we're talking about Biden's presidency now, right? And
that's been the narrative since the 90s. Oh,
but I mean, they have
the illegals are here, and they're somehow taking Social Security without Social Security number, and they're somehow
according to
not paying taxes.
According to Doge, some of them do have Social Security numbers, but again, with the Doge stuff, I am waiting, just like the Russian stuff. I'm waiting for the evidence, because I can go to Doge's website and I see numbers, and I'm like, they don't mean anything to me until I start seeing receipts.
They claimed an enormous number early on,
yeah,
and had to retract significantly.
Yeah. But yeah, back to Kamala Harris. She was interviewed by Brett Baier, and it was like her only adversarial interview during her campaign, which...
There's another problem right there, right?
Well, and this is something, like, it seems like a lot of people on the left are more mad at Trump for winning than they are at the Democrats for just doing a horrible job.
Pretty mad at them, too.
Yeah. Well, that's good, because I think it was a very flawed campaign. I think it was kind. I would.
Why was it flawed? Like, what didn't you like about the campaign?
It was an affront to democracy to place a candidate as the nominee without a single vote being cast for her. That was pretty disgusting, and it was interesting how many supporters of Democrats I heard basically trying to make the case that they somehow did vote for Kamala because they voted for Biden, but that's not how it works. So it was just insane, the stretches that people made to try to make it seem like it wasn't just completely undemocratic, but it was very undemocratic. It was just them. They chose to put Kamala in that position, and it was the Democratic elites. The voters had absolutely no say in the matter. So I think
for the Democratic nominee.
For the Democratic nominee.
But once the Democratic nominee was in place,
she ran a horrible campaign.
What did you not like about the campaign?
Strategy-wise, it was just a bad campaign. Like, look at the stuff that happened with Rogan. Rogan invited him on, and they wanted to stipulate all these things. You know, Trump went on. You can hate the guy all you want. Trump went on there, had a 3-hour unscripted conversation with Joe Rogan. Kamala Harris was unwilling to do that. She was unwilling to go on any interviews that weren't completely scripted. We have evidence in multiple cases where, like, places like CBS edited interviews to make her look better than she was. And then the interview that with Brett Baer, I was actually kind of frustrated listening to her because I'm like, I hope people don't believe the shit that she's saying, because she's saying, he asked her, why did you guys remove these executive orders that were, for the border? And her answer was basically, we're trying to pass a bill through Congress. The executive branch doesn't pass bills. That's Congress. So basically what she's saying is, we removed executive orders to create a problem and then wanted Congress to fix the problem that we created by removing the orders.
Well, it is a decidedly frustrating aspect of administration change that they just wipe out the old executive orders and then just add a whole bunch of new ones. Like day one, how many did Trump sign?
Trump signed
more. It was in the hundreds, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, I think Biden signed a lot. I mean, it's a dumb way to govern. This is more recent, and this is one of the reasons that China's got us by the balls, essentially, is because China can plan long term, but we're
very short-sighted.
We're focused on this guy gets into 4 years to undo what the other guy did for 4 years, and then this guy gets in and undo and it's just like
right.
We're
both
just
the DNC
stuck,
and the GOP are giant corporations who are corporations first.
Yeah. 100%.
And they want the status quo, and they want to be the power brokers, and because it's very lucrative, and the American voters getting the short shrift. So you asked me, what would I like to see happen?
Yeah.
I'm glad you asked. There are a few things that I would really like to see happen right away. 4 come to mind, and I'll probably come up with a 5th before I'm there. But number 1, members of Congress cannot trade stocks or be consultants for a fucking decade, you pieces of shit. I'm looking at you, any politician who's getting money from lobbyists, anyway. So I'd like to see that change right away. You can't.
Can I add something to that? There's speculation that Trump has been manipulating markets for the benefit of people around him, which, if of course, that's just as bad as members of Congress doing it.
Of course he is. What do you think that Trump coin is all about? He doesn't have the slightest fucking clue what the blockchain is.
Well, that's a little different than what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the stock market. And one of the side effects of this is kind of funny, because now you have people in Congress, a few people, not too many, because most of them are doing the insider trading, but you do have a few members of Congress outraged about this and saying it needs to be illegal, and we need to stop this in Congress too. And it's like, if Trump is manipulating markets, that is definitely wrong, but it might be an interesting side effect if it actually gets attention on this problem that has existed in Congress for decades that they refuse to address. If they finally like, oh, now that Trump's doing it, we have to address it. It's kind of one of those funny things, because Trump gets people so pissed off that they're like, now we have to do something about it. But you and I both know this is not one party. Both parties have been doing it for decades, just cashing in on their insider knowledge, which is highly illegal, but somehow they do it.
It's abhorrent.
Yeah.
What a betrayal of the confidence that American voters have given our representatives.
Yeah.
There's a disgraceful breach of ethics, and I'm extremely embarrassed for our country. All right. So the stock insider trading and then going on to have consulting jobs for business so that they can write their own effing legislation.
Would you add
I haven't told you yet.
No, I mean to that one, would you, or maybe this would be separate, like the revolving door and that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. Term limits. Love to see term limits right away.
Yeah.
Number 2, gerrymandering laws. National gerrymandering laws, where you can't make a line of any boundary that's like shorter than a mile.
Yeah, I like that.
What these clowns have done here in Utah around Salt Lake County, and the way that they've carved up Salt Lake County to water down the population of the urban center, so that the rural votes get the disproportionate amount of influence
Yeah.
is cheating to win. That is for the purpose of holding on to power at the expense of not understanding the will of the voters.
Yeah.
That's disgusting.
This
That
does
should
happen. This is both parties that do this. Though.
Rampant. There needs to be like a national independent commission on how to draw districts, because
Yeah.
gerrymandering is a cheating to win strategy, and that's got to go. I don't care what party it is. And then fourth on my list is I want to see an increase in access to voting. I want to know the will of the people fairly and honestly, which means it needs to be easy for people to vote, convenient for people to vote. We should have a national holiday on that the second November Tuesday, second Tuesday in November. There should be mail-in voting. It's incredibly secure. What's this bullshit about closing down mail-in voting? It's reliable. It's not corrupt at all. They've looked into dead people voting and immigrants, non-resident aliens voting, whatever. And the number of deceptions found is abysmally low. It is not rampant. It is almost unheard of because it's so traceable and it's really reliable. Mail-in voting, more, and what do we find that the GOP is doing in the areas where they have stronghold, where they have opposition? Closing polling stations, putting in these long lines, making people jump through certain hoops in order to vote. We used to do this with black people, and they were 3/5 of a vote. And the Jim Crow laws, and you had to take a literacy test in order to vote. These are barriers to prevent people who would vote the way you don't want them to vote. And so tear down all the barriers that we can for voting that will still leave us with a reliable count at the end of the day. The people who are allowed to vote are voting and voting exactly once. We don't want to be gutting putting artificial timelines on when the vote has to be returned. We want to make sure that the vote is accurate. And if that takes an extra couple days, then it takes a couple extra days. But I want the American voice to be heard loudly and fairly.
Yeah.
And these goons that are running the show, whoever's got their hands on the reins of power, left or right, are not making that easier. I want to be with the group that is inclusive of getting the voices and getting a fair understanding of what the people are asking for. The Utah legislature keeps thumbing their nose. We do these voter referendums when we say, yeah, we want medicinal marijuana. And the legislature said, no, we're not going to do that.
Yeah, they watered it down.
Why is there no accountability when they thumb their nose at the will of the people? So you're asking me what I would like to see. That's where I would start, is with those four things.
I do like one thing that the Utah legislature did. You might disagree, but I like that they removed
the fluoridation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, controversial. I read recently that they got rid of fluoridation up somewhere in Canada. Was it Vancouver? I can't remember where it was. And relatively shortly after, there was a large spike in dental problems among kids especially, and they've reinstated it, which, about that too, because clearly fluoride is good for your teeth. Swallowing topically, only topically. Drinking all that fluoride.
And it is no neurotoxin.
I know.
Yeah.
When they voted in, it was probably like 2006 or 2007 here in Utah, up in Bountiful, where I lived at the time. I had a say no to the fluoride sign in my lawn because I have reservations about what fluoride does to the brains of the population.
Yeah.
Let's find a different way to get fluoride onto the teeth of people without us ingesting unbelievable amounts of a neurotoxin that we don't. My fear is that we do understand it very well, and that's why it's there. But anyway, but it does seem to reduce cavities, and it becomes a much harder argument to make. But I'm deeply suspicious of what fluoride does in the long term in the population.
For the cavities, lower IQ, which we choose.
Well,
you know,
one's much harder to show. One's really easy to demonstrate.
Well, the data around fluoridation is actually not as clear cut as a lot of people want to. Yeah, the pro fluoride people, as clear as they'd want people to believe, because we're dealing.
Oh, are you in the pro cavity camp?
We're in the the real world, right? So it's like we can't run controlled studies, right? We can't do controlled studies in real life environments. Like it doesn't work. You can't control variables in real world settings. You just can't do it. So
you have to test in production.
Yeah, like you basically, like the data just isn't as clear.
Yeah.
So like it's one of those things where the data might support what you believe or what you want to believe, but
that's not very scientific approach.
Yeah, like, and this is the case with like, I love science, but a lot of people start creating narratives about what science says, as if science is a monolith.
You have to. You can't just look at the data. You can't just show people the raw data and say, see,
but
what is this? What does this mean? Well, I need a narrative to tell you that.
Yeah.
Narratives are important.
Yeah.
Stories are important because it tells us how we see the world in a way that we can comprehend. It helps us comprehend the enormous amount of data that we could never possibly take in. Like, but narrative has its role in our existence. You can't really function without narrative.
I'm going to push back on something you offered last time.
Yeah, go.
How does COVID get transmitted? Like, we were talking about masks, right? And you said
it hitches the ride on water molecules in the air.
Water droplets in there, right?
Uh-huh.
It's actually not true. It's aerosols, which are smaller than the water droplets because they actually hang in the air and they are very much small enough to get through masks.
So
there's a Cochrane study that analyzed, I think it was 78 peer-reviewed studies with masks, and that's what determined that there was no significant change for masked populations versus unmasked populations, no matter what the mask was. And I know there's some data that pushes against it. I'm not going to act like this study.
Well, let's split the hair between water droplets and aerosols. What do you mean?
So water droplets have a size of, I think it's greater than 5 microns.
And can that carry COVID?
It can, but that was a narrative that was pushed that that's how COVID was traveling. But the science actually shows that the majority of COVID is passed through aerosols, which are smaller than those droplets. You can look into this. I know I'm throwing something at you that you maybe haven't looked into, so I'm not going to be like, respond to this without any looking into it.
I have no bones about it. So if COVID can be in smaller than 5 microns and larger than 5 microns, what that tells me is that masks will prevent everything down to 5 microns, and that's not nothing.
The problem is those droplets are heavy enough that they don't stay in the air. What's staying in the air is the aerosols that are small. That's how COVID is being transmitted. So the masks aren't doing anything for that.
I don't know how you come to that conclusion. We know that there's moisture inside those masks. It is catching some droplets some of which will fall to the ground and some of which will not. But you're catching some of them. We know because the masks get wet.
They get wet in the inside. That's what you're talking about?
And you could test, if a person had COVID, you could test that, you swab that and get a positive COVID test.
Yeah.
Which means it's preventing COVID molecules from getting into the air, some of which will fall to the ground and some of which will float around. Some of them get caught.
I think I said this last time too. I'm for sick people wearing masks. I mean, they shouldn't be going out. If you have COVID, you should not be going out. But if you're sick, wearing a mask probably does help.
Help who?
Just physics. You're not going to be like, the air pressure isn't as much. Like if I go and I go, I know that the air is not traveling as far.
Yeah.
If I'm wearing a mask, right?
Sure. Where
the masks aren't really doing anything is sick people wearing a mask, I don't think it's doing that much.
Of course it is. The same reason that it's catching some particles going out is also preventing some particles coming in.
But why? I mean, Cochrane is a very respected entity in science.
Sure.
Why are they showing that it doesn't make a difference?
Again, I haven't seen the study, so
I'll find it and send it to you.
Comment on it. But what you're saying here is that if you're sick, there can be some capture of COVID molecules in some of the water. With COVID, there is a period of time where you have a communicable disease, but you are not yet showing symptoms.
Yeah.
So if you're not wearing a mask during this time of our national healthcare's structure is starting to buckle under the weight of the number of people who are trying to seek help.
Yeah.
That anything that we can do to prevent some transmission of a person who is, what's the word I'm looking for?
Contagious?
Contagious, thank you.
Yeah.
Someone who's contagious but doesn't know it yet could be spreading these everywhere. At least we're capturing some and reducing the risk of exposures to others, especially other sensitive ones. It's a socially responsible thing to do, even if it's annoying.
I have to look into this because I don't want to say something incorrect here, but I don't think asymptomatic spread was that prevalent. I think
we didn't know at the time.
Yeah, well, we did after a little while. Like, this is the thing, is like a lot of narratives got created at first, and then the information didn't update.
Got created. That's a funny way to put that. What do you mean the narratives got created at first?
Formed. The word doesn't matter, but narrative was put forth
by,
official people in the arena where they have a microphone. They can put that forth. Health professionals,
doctors,
CDC,
professors.
Yeah. I mean,
so some of these
doctors and professors,
some of these
can be wrong.
Narratives may have been correct,
but they weren't. Like the idea that it was water.
You can't blanket say that all the narratives were incorrect.
I believe all narratives are flawed.
Yes, all words are flawed.
It's like but all narratives are they're incomplete. Like they're
sure.
What narratives do is you start filtering information in and out based on whether it fits in with that narrative. That's where one of the big dangers of the narrative is. So when it comes to water droplets, that was a narrative that was pushed really early, but then the science determined, that's not how this is being spread. It's aerosols. But people still believe that narrative. It's water droplets that are too big to go through masks. But that's not true.
So is there COVID on the inside of that mask?
If you have COVID, yeah.
So it's stopping something.
Yeah. Like I said. Yeah.
So then it's not fair to say that it does nothing. That's not, those are incompatible statements.
Way less effective than they're just not very
way
effective.
Less than 100%, right? Less than 100%.
They're not effective.
Whoa.
Cochrane,
no, hold on.
That Cochrane review said there is no difference between masked, unmasked. And we're talking N95, surgical, doesn't matter.
Then he's wrong.
It's an analysis of 78 peer-reviewed studies.
Then he's come to a flawed conclusion. If we know that there's COVID on the inside of that mask, then it's not doing nothing. It's doing more than zero.
Not necessarily. Because
it is necessarily because there's COVID inside that mask, which means it's not outside the mask.
That's not true. Having COVID in the mask does not mean none's getting out.
No. What I'm saying is, because there is some in there, the ones that are in there didn't get out.
Yeah, but those could also be the ones that are in droplets and not aerosols, so they're not the ones spreading COVID in the first place.
It's not like water droplets have only two sizes, right? There's an infinite range of size. The larger ones will drop quickly.
Yeah.
The smallest ones could float for a very long time.
Those are aerosols.
And then there's some in between.
But those are aerosols. Those aren't water droplets.
Fine.
Yeah.
But also they are water droplets, aren't they?
But there's a difference in the size.
Sure, but we're talking about tiny little itty bitlets of water.
Yeah.
I guess that's not a droplet. Fine. That's fine. I don't care.
It's
but
technicality.
In between these two extremes is everything, every size. Some will linger in the air and then work their way down slowly. Some will just go or right in your forehead. Or, there's a whole range, and catching some of that range is preventing some of those those molecules from getting around and potentially inhaled at the supermarket, inhaled at the bar, inhaled at the doctor's office or whatever. It is catching something, because when you test the moisture on the inside of the mask of someone who has COVID, you will get a positive COVID test. It's stopping some molecules. Yeah. Not all, but not none. It's wrong to say that it's ineffective and does nothing. That's not true, because I can swab the inside of a sick person's mask and get a positive result.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean exactly what you're trying to relay that it does. Because think about this. If the science is showing that what's spreading COVID is the aerosols that are small enough to go through masks, that's what's spreading COVID. Let's say they determine that's how 99% of COVID is being transmitted. And then 1% is water droplets that are too big to move through masks. And those water droplets are what's not going through the mask, but those only account for 1% of transmission anyway. Then how effective are those masks?
So let's say that it was the other way around, and that it's catching 95%, but letting 5% through.
Yeah.
And it turns out that even a piece of, you take a cotton t-shirt and you strip it into a strip and put it over your mouth. If they're like 60% effective as a standard mask, whatever that means. If I'm putting fewer out there into the supermarket air, and somebody walking around has a piece of cotton strip around their mouth, and it catches 60% of that, you're having 2 layers of reduction from lung to lung. That's not nothing.
Yeah, but if the data suggests that's not doing anything, I would trust the data more than speculation.
Well, so that makes for an interesting impasse, because you're saying on the one hand that the data says it does nothing.
I've said that Cochrane review, which is very respected, looked at like 78 plus peer-reviewed studies and found that there was no statistical difference for wearing masks versus not wearing masks, and it didn't matter what mask you're wearing for transmission of COVID. And like, this idea that because there's COVID inside the mask, that's not getting out there. I don't even know that I would agree with that, because if COVID is sitting there on the edge of your mask, every time you breathe, maybe you're not pushing the droplets out that are coming out of your mouth right now, but there's some force of air. So maybe those COVID particles, the virus that's sitting there on the edge of the mask, because you have a bunch of built out, every time you breathe, there's a greater concentration of those coming out, because all the virus is sitting right here. So, and that makes sense, right? Just from a physics standpoint of like, if you have a higher concentration of something and you have a little bit of pressure going out, the greater the concentration that's going to build up here, the more that's going to escape over time.
Sure, but every time you put on a fresh mask, you're starting at least to catch that initial batch. It's still going to be better than nothing.
Yeah, but then you have the problem of like, well, how often do you need to change the mask to be effective? Because it could be 5 minutes, it could be 4 hours. I don't know the answer to this, and I'm not going to claim to. I'm just saying.
But there is a period of time that it's kind of effective.
Possibly. I mean, I'd have to see. I mean, wanting to believe something versus having the data to support it are two different things, you know?
I mean, imagine, is that an air filter right there?
Yeah.
Okay, so imagine I've got a spray gun and I'm going in here. Eventually, it's going to clog up your filter. It's going to just fill that filter up, and you open up the filter, it's going to be covered in that paint, right? But if I put a whole bunch of masks, COVID masks down the front of it, and I spray the air, the masks are going to stop some of it, and still some's going to get in there.
Yeah.
But if I put on the mask on the end of the gun, and I got masks on the front of your fan, the filter is going to have way less paint because there was a mask here and a cascade of masks there that will catch some of those paint molecules. All of them? No. Some of them? Yeah. A good portion? Well, I don't know how well paint equates to the spoken aerosolization.
I don't think it'd be too close, but it makes the point. Another factor of that is masks become less effective as they get wet.
Yes.
So the fact that they're getting wet with the virus on there means that part that has the virus sitting there is less effective as it gets wet.
Yeah.
So like,
yes, they become less effective over time, but that means there's a time when they are somewhat more effective early on. And the reason that we want to do that is not the self-interested, well, I don't care if I get sick, or I don't care if my neighbors get sick. That's not even the point anyway. The point is we had a system that was buckling under the weight of sick people.
In hundreds of thousands. In certain areas. It was never nationally going on all at once.
The system, the needles, the masks, the Band-Aids, the anesthetic, the swabs, the catheters, the everything, the ventilators can only be produced so fast and hoarded by so many before there is a national problem where medical professionals don't have the resources they need to treat the people that they've got.
Yeah.
And sure, maybe it's just in Houston today and in Boise the next day.
Yeah.
And it's only for a few weeks in Dubuque or whatever. But the people in Dubuque are like, shit, we are out of masks. We can't get them to come. Where the shit are the needles?
Yeah.
We are out of cotton swabs. We need more all the resources.
Yeah.
And so it's not just people with COVID who are suffering, but people who are going in for the regular stuff, the appendicitis and the broken limb and the medical establishment of the country was buckling under the weight of so much demand with something we didn't understand very well. And the only thing that and among the things we knew we could do is keep a little distance from each other. Let's not get together in large groups because it's highly transmissible, which it was.
Mm-hmm.
Masks can prevent, as far as I can tell, some transmission, especially if both ends of the breathing are, my breathing and your breathing are each separated by its own barrier. It will reduce some transmission when we're spending time together. And if we spend a lot of time together, our chances of exposure do go up because we're putting more and more and more and more into the air.
I don't know if we're gonna. I don't know if there's a right answer for this because, as I said, there's studies that show that there was no effectiveness, and there's studies that show there are. I'm not gonna act like one. Too many people do that in discussions where non-scientific people start talking about science, and they find the study that agrees with them, and they ignore the fact that there's studies that disagree. So I'm not going to do that. It is interesting that there is not a consensus on this.
I'd be curious to read this guy's report because I
don't think it's a guy. I think Cochrane is like the institution or something like that. So it's not like one guy. It's some institution that's like well respected or something.
Who pays that institution? That's an interesting question.
That'd be a good question. I want to ask you about something, and I want to just put it out there for the next conversation because I want to give you some. Oh, first of all, I wanted to clarify something. On the last conversation, I didn't add some nuance to the ventilators comment that I made.
Oh, sure.
So ventilators aren't necessarily bad, but there's some serious risk with secondary infections.
Sure.
The problem with ventilators, and I didn't express this nuance, and I probably didn't even understand it enough. It was early ventilation. The problem was people were being put on ventilators too early in their symptoms. And when you put people on ventilators, they have to be sedated. And like I said, high risk of secondary infections.
Yeah, intubation.
Guess what the death rate was for people who were put on early ventilation? 70 to 90%.
Wow.
Insane, right? Like I read that. I'm like, wow.
Where did you read this?
This ChatGPT. I did, so crazy to hear that. Okay. we could talk about the COVID vaccine next time, maybe. I can give you a couple. Nah, I'm not even going to go into that.
Okay.
I want to go into the polio vaccine.
Okay.
Because you said you believe that the vaccine ended polio. And I think the only thing I said...
Is that out there? I didn't realize that was in dispute.
That's the thing. I mean, it is a narrative. There were some...
Narrative doesn't mean wrong.
It usually means incomplete. It means...
What the hell what is complete? What idea is complete?
Well, narrative usually means some information is being filtered out to maintain the narrative.
But what could ever possibly contain all the information?
So, okay, with polio, this is what I've found out.
Okay.
I went down a rabbit hole over the last week with polio, with the polio vaccine. I'm generally for vaccination. I think it can be helpful for people, but I do have questions about big pharma, and big pharma is behind all the vaccines and stuff like that. Do you think there's anything else that could have been responsible for the decline in polio? Or the elimination of it? Because I'm gonna give you some facts that I don't want you to respond to without any information.
Okay.
I want you to absorb it and then look into it, and maybe we can have a more thorough discussion in the future.
Okay, give me a second just to think. You're suggesting that maybe there's an environmental factor.
Mm-hmm. Environment, yeah.
I can already hear RFK singing this song, but I'm not. He says autism is an environmental factor. Bullshit. How could he be sure that it's definitely an environmental factor? I think it has more to do with the fact that we have highly evolved brains that are wired for pattern recognition, and we grew up in a society that doesn't tell us what we're supposed to pay attention to.
Yeah,
and that it is not about a toxin that we're putting in people, but we're putting people into a society that has no connection to the natural world and the world that we live in. So as it recognizes the patterns, it pays attention to the number of toothpicks in a box and the baseball statistics from 1987 World Series and all sorts of like endless movie quotes that are in my brain.
I'm not going to go too deep into autism because I don't know, and I know this is controversial. I'm waiting for more data to come out. As of right now, I don't think vaccines cause autism.
But anyway, the siren song of environmental. I've already got an orange flag on that. But
okay.
But did you find some?
Why do you have an orange flag?
RFK just the other day went spouting off.
Without RFK, I mean,
I'm answering your question.
Okay.
Went spouting off about autism is definitely an environmental thing, and it's causing all sorts of horrible things that these people don't have jobs and can't function. Fuck you, RFK. That's horrifying. I'm autistic. I pay my mortgage. I have a job. I wipe my own ass.
Yeah.
And he just across the board said that autistic people don't have any happiness in their life at all, and it's all because of this vaccine. And I find that reprehensible and irresponsible.
People.
I'm not like Dustin Hoffman in Rain Man.
Yeah.
I'm extremely high functioning. I have little tendencies, autistish maybe. But him blaming environmental factors and not understanding the nature of autism at all, the way he described it, makes me very suspicious when we're talking about vaccines and environmental factors. It's an orange flag, and it's not your fault. What did you uncover? What did you find? Are there any environmental factors that seem like that piqued your interest? Because I am curious about it.
Okay, well,
I'm not ruling it out ahead of time, but I will warn you that this was just on my mind.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand why you don't like RFK, but the fact that he speculates something doesn't mean that speculation is off the table for other regards. I think the environmental thing for him is like, when you see an increase in something that didn't exist before, it's natural is a little hard, but like it just happened. Like I know the definition of autism has broadened, but sometimes when you see an increase in something, it's like, why is that happening? What has changed? And environmental can be a culprit.
Absolutely.
I don't want to go into the autism because I don't know enough about it, but
polio.
I want you to fact check me and everything.
Yeah, I'm curious.
I'm going to try to get everything that is objectively true that I believe everything I'm going to relay is objectively true.
Yeah.
Polio virus is everywhere. All over the place. Like, I don't know exactly where it is, but my understanding is it is all over. Everywhere, right? There were cases of polio, and in 1840, it was discovered before 1840, but 1840 there was a pretty thorough analysis of it. I can't remember the scientist's name, but he said it's extremely rare. It's not around, like people aren't getting it all the time. Every once in a while you see a case of polio.
Okay.
And polio is like paralysis of limbs and stuff like that, typically.
It can just maim you. Like, I have an aunt who had polio as a child.
Yeah.
And only one leg grew fully. The other one didn't grow fully. So she had this kind of...
1892, lead arsenate is an inorganic pesticide that was used for the first time that year. And this might be wrong, but I believe the first like little epidemic of polio was 1893, the next year. In the 20s and 30s, cases were rising slowly, and it correlated with spaces that had increased chemical exposure. You know what DDT is?
Yep.
Yeah. Look at the book that was
Silent Spring.
Silent Spring, yeah. You remember, I mean, we weren't alive at this time, but like I'm sure you've seen videos. Kids were sprayed with DDT at beaches. It was sprayed on everything. Crops were doused with it. It was used all over.
Covering the environment with poison is a bad strategy.
It tends to be, from what I understand. Okay, so 40s and 50s, that's when DDT was at its highest usage. 52 was the year where the polio cases were the highest. So there was a correlation between polio and inorganic pesticides, specifically lead arsenate and DDT. So the polio vaccine was introduced the Salk vaccine was introduced in 55 or 62. Side note of that, there was simian virus in a huge batch of the early vaccines that they exposed. At least 30 million people got injected with simian virus through the vaccines, which can cause like tumors and stuff like that. But that was just a side note. So the vaccine is introduced in 55, 62. That's when the vaccines are rolling out. At the same time, they changed the definition of polio. So before this time, polio was any kind of paralysis lasting more than 2 days. But after this, it has to last at least 60 days to be considered polio. So at this point in time, polio actually isn't gone. Like what we considered polio in the early 50s and 40s actually still takes place sometimes. We just have different names for it, like Guillain-Barré syndrome. So
Guillain-Barré, yeah.
Yeah, how do you pronounce that?
Guillain-Barré.
Guillain-Barré. It wasn't even close. So they changed the definition of what polio was. So of course you're going to have a massive decline in cases when you change the definition to be more strict, right? It has to persist for more than 60 days and required you have to confirm the virus in lab setting to confirm polio. DDT was banned in 1972. Last natural polio case was 1975.
That's the year I was.
It's just interesting.
Same thing happened with leaded gasoline in major cities. You know, you know about this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just briefly, when we started putting leaded gasoline fumes into the air in major cities. Lead is also a neurotoxin, and 20 years later, as those children grew into adults, there was a huge spike in violence in our urban areas.
Yeah.
Right? We started having unleaded gas.
Yeah.
We realized that was a mistake in, was it the late 70s, early 80s? And so we stopped. 20 years later, there was a massive drop in violent crime right around the time Giuliani became mayor of New York.
Yeah.
And everybody credited with him with reducing crime, but it was an environmental factor.
That's politics, right? If something happens on your watch that looks good, it's me. I did that, right?
Yeah. So
you can thank me later, guys.
That is fascinating.
Does that, I mean, I'm not saying like, please accept that it was environmental stuff, but like, does that kind of make you question that a little bit?
Well, I mean, it's certainly consistent with what we did with lead, and that is easily within our ability to gloss over. You're talking about narrative, right?
Yeah.
So that's fascinating. I've never heard that before.
Yeah, I came across a video, and it's like whenever I come across a video, I'm like, I need to do some research to see if, like, videos can be deceiving. I think I only played, like, it was a 2-minute video. I think I played about 10 seconds, and then I just started using ChatGPT to look at this. And
did the smallpox vaccine work, or was that environmental too?
I don't know. Basically, there is no vaccine that's without controversy. They don't exist.
Right, and you would expect that.
Yeah, I have to look more into smallpox. Smallpox was earlier, right? Smallpox was
1700s.
We're dealing with something different here. So there was pushback against that vaccine. And I looked into polio way more because polio was like the first
big one. Yeah.
Big pharma vaccine.
Yeah.
Like it was the first one of its kind. The smallpox vaccine was like, I think it was like, am I going to denatured virus? Is that?
Not a doctor.
It was a weakened virus or something. I think that's.
Oh yeah, that's probably right.
And I have no reason to doubt that vaccines help eliminate polio or smallpox.
Mm-hmm.
With polio, I still don't think it's impossible that the vaccine contributed to ending it. I just think that there are other...
But for you, that raises a question mark.
It's like, how much was it? How much was the vaccine and how much was getting rid of DDT and changing the definition of the virus, you know? And it's just really interesting because it's like, again, the simplified narrative is vaccines ended.
Yeah.
polio.
A narrative is necessarily reductionist, right?
Yeah.
But there's no other way to communicate.
Yeah.
But that's all we've got. I wanted to go back to something I was looking for earlier that I couldn't find, but I found it. Before we move on, is there more you wanted to cover on that or for me to look into for next time?
Yeah, no, I would just love to hear your thoughts on it. Cause like, obviously I have my brain and my perception. So when I read this and maybe I'm more skeptical of the science at this point, I mean, like I am a little bit jaded toward I've always hated big pharma, but I'm more skeptical.
They deserve the skepticism that they're getting.
Yeah. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I would love to have you look into that, and we can look into other ones too. Polio is my focus for this one
because that's what I spouted last time. Is like the clear case.
And I could have looked into measles more, but I didn't. I wanted to focus on the one and be like, okay, is the premise correct here? Yeah. And then I'm not going to say vaccines don't do anything. I think they can be beneficial, especially for people who are immunocompromised or.
And you still mistrust big pharma. Both of these things can exist. Yeah,
100%. Okay. So yeah, that's it. So please, I want to hear what you had to say.
So we were talking about Kilmer, Armando, Abrego Garcia.
Oh yeah.
My eyes have gotten so bad, dude. It's unreal. Anyway, Attorney General Pam Bondi said, "We are releasing additional information on Kilmer Abrego Garcia, justice.gov/ag/media, blah, blah, blah."
Yeah.
And the U.S. Department of Homeland Security here's a little cutout of a document that she referenced, her own link.
Yeah.
It's got alien's name, Abrego Garcia, Kilmer Armado, file number redacted, previous criminal history, ... Subject has no criminal history.
Interesting.
But this is the person that was shipped to El Salvador.
Yeah.
Without due process, and is met with indifference from Trump. Had the president of El Salvador come over, be palsy pals, because president of El Salvador considers him to be the coolest dictator.
Yeah.
And Trump didn't give him a funny nickname and say, return this somebody who was not convicted of any crime at all, but was just picked up off the street and whisked out of the country, a clear mistake that he's unwilling to even address. And if there's not due process for certain kinds of citizens, then there's going to be not due process for other kinds of citizens eventually. It doesn't go the other way.
Yeah, this is something I'm not going to like defend Trump here. The only thing I'll say is like I can't think of any president that has gone 4 years or even probably a month without doing something I disagree with.
Yeah, but this is not just something I disagree with. During the Clinton administration in the late 90s, some asshole was spray painting, I think, in Thailand, in Singapore. He spat out his gum. I don't know, whatever it was. He had a joint. It was some silly infraction. And he was arrested, convicted, and sentenced to caning.
Yeah.
They were going to publicly beat him with a cane.
This was in the U.S.?
Yeah. No. This took place in Singapore.
Oh, okay.
And Clinton intervened to get this American citizen out of this punishment. It was a big international story in the late 90s. But the president stood by and assisted a citizen that was being subjected to an injustice. Trump, seeing this injustice, seeing a person with no criminal history being taken without charge and dropped into a concentration camp in a foreign country under a known dictator,
it's a prison, right? Like, I mean, concentration camp is like specifically people.
You tell me.
Working.
You look up the pictures of that place, and you tell me.
Yeah, I haven't. So, I mean,
you tell me.
I do believe some prisons are about at the level of.
Look at the El Salvador prisons, man. They are concentration camps.
Yeah,
they are shaved. They are shackled, and they are left on these little metal beds stacked 4 to 6 high, where people are just stacked by the hundreds.
Yeah,
it looks like the old pictures of Dachau before things got really out of hand.
Where's his citizenship? Is he an El Salvadorian?
I don't know. He's not.
See, that's something I really don't like. Like, if I can see sending somebody back to their home country if they're here illegally and letting that person's country do something with. I do think it's wrong to send somebody to a different country that they have no tie to. Because El Salvador doesn't have information.
But the Supreme Court ordered him not to do it.
Yeah.
Something we know is unjust, and he's just powerless to do anything. What the hell are we talking about here?
Yeah, I mean, and this is one of the things. Like, I do believe every president has done things that I find atrocious and despicable. Trump has had several.
But I read this, Steve Inskeep tweeted this one. If I understand this correctly, the U.S. president has launched a trade war against the world, believes that he can force the EU and China to meet his terms, is determined to annex Canada and Greenland, but is powerless before the sovereign might of El Salvador? Is that it?
No, I mean, obviously he can try to bring him back. Like, and this is the thing. I'm not going to defend Trump in this regard at all. I don't see any reason to.
But this is a fascist thing to do. Arresting people without charge and shipping them off to another country without any ability to get him back?
Due process is important. I mean,
he's being deprived. The court, his effing court, unanimously told him, no, you can't do that.
Yeah.
And he did it anyway.
Yeah.
That's fascism. He's, as far as I can tell, a very dangerous person.
Yeah. Were you concerned when Biden basically executed somebody without due process? I mean, Muhammad.
Yeah, no, I'm sure that's fine. As long as it's my team, it's okay. What the hell? I actually don't know what you're talking about.
It was around the Afghanistan withdrawal. There was a guy who was in Afghanistan, and he was, I don't know if I think he was with his family. And they found him, killed him, saying he was a terrorist. Turns out, no, wasn't. He was just an innocent person. We've seen this. I mean, it's not like Biden's the first person to do it.
So,
and I'm not justifying what Trump is doing.
And there's a whole 350 million people, countless soldiers at bases all over the world in military engagements, and their military mistakes. It's not like Biden went over and shot the guy.
Yeah, no, he allowed it to happen, and then after it happened, said he was a terrorist and kept lying about it.
Yeah,
this is what people do to justify their behavior.
That's abhorrent.
Yeah.
This case, however, does not compare, because Trump was not only aware and ordered unanimously by the Supreme Court not to.
Yeah.
He did it anyway.
Yeah.
Who is controlling what is happening at the hands of ICE agents?
Yeah.
Well, it's not the courts. It's not the Congress.
I have to look into him more specifically. Obviously, there's the claims that he's MS-13, which I'm not going to believe it just because it's said, but
I mean, he's not. There's no. He doesn't have to. You should look at the guy. Like, there are pictures. This senator, what's his face, went over and visited with him. So this guy's story, is really a test of the will of our Constitution. Does it protect our rights, or doesn't it? And I will send it. I'll send you a link to that.
It's interesting. I mean, I don't think we have that much protection. I mean, we have some protection under the Constitution, but I think much of that went away during W's presidency with the Patriot Act. I mean, when you declare war on things like terror and drugs, this is Reagan we're talking about now, but when you declare war on ideas, on concept like terrorism and drugs, you have carte blanche.
Yeah.
I mean, you could just do whatever you want because, like, well, we're stopping terrorism. And it's like TSA. It's like TSA was created to stop attacks like 9/11, but there's been more bad stuff coming out of TSA than good stuff. Like, they haven't prevented anything, and there's been a ton of abuse. Like, TSA people, not plenty of TSA people are good, but there has been many reports of people being violated by people in TSA, and then TSA covers up, because this is what government institutions do, is they cover up their wrongdoing.
Just like the Catholic Church.
I mean, this is a problem with powerful institutions. It is horrible that this is the case. And if we were to, the funny thing is, we argued a lot on this interview.
Oh, I love it. Did you have fun?
Oh yeah.
I'm not 100%. The slightest upset or anything. I like exploring these ideas. And you present
great rebuttals. I hope
you too.
I hope I challenge you.
The polio thing is fascinating. I really need to go check that out, because that's wild.
Yeah, I hope I present good challenges to your ideas, and you present great challenges to me. I love our conversations. And what I was going to say is, the funny thing is, we've been arguing, but like where we're at right now, where things just went, like talking about like institutions and the corruption, like we would probably start moving into territory where we'd be in agreement for the next 2 hours if we kept going.
I think we said this the first time, but I bet when you get down to it, we agree on all the fundamentals about fairness and justice and honesty and growth and safety and economic responsibility and not taxing more than we need to. And I bet you when you get down right to it, we agree on virtually everything.
Yeah.
And what we run into is the amount of data that that you and I are trying to analyze the little bits and pieces of mistaken assumptions that we each make, and the corresponding narrative that we each have in our own heads about what these facts mean, have got us pointed in different directions. But I think at the foundation, we are probably perfectly. I'd be shocked if there's anything that we really disagree on. That isn't, well, what does this mean? Extrapolation, and it's pointing in different directions. But I know that you've come to your extrapolation honestly, and I think we can respectfully talk around and through these things without it saying you're bad, or that your narrative somehow threatens my sense of self. Doesn't.
Well, I mean, and this is the problem. You see tons of content out there where someone that comes to mind is Nick Fuentes. You know who he is?
Yeah. Why do I know that? He's an asshole, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay.
He's someone I have no problem. I can interview people on the right, left. No problem. Sure. It doesn't bug me. Like their political, like where they are on the spectrum doesn't matter to me too much. But with him, he's I think he's disingenuous with the way that he approaches things. I think he wants to get reactions out of people. I'm like, I'm not going to say I'll never do anything to get a reaction out of people. I don't like to. I don't like, and honestly, like even in like my friend circles, like I'll, talk some crap about my, I'll voice my political opinions, and sometimes in more abrasive ways every once in a while. It's like, sometimes I'm like, even though I believe what I'm saying, I don't like offending people. Like I don't like hurting people's feelings, but I also, a core belief of mine is speak your truth.
Well, yeah, you're
at the risk of hurting people, because why? Like you're hurting more people by avoiding the conversation, trying to cater to people's feelings.
You can speak your truth compassionately without having responsibility for people's emotional reactions to what you've had to say. Right? I can say something that might undermine somebody's credibility in their doctor, and that might make them mad at me. But if I'm not saying, you're going to a jerk, I'm not telling them to like make them feel bad. I would be telling them because, hey, there's a concern here that Harvard is misspelled on his diploma. Or whatever. And speaking of doctors,
you have to go.
I've got to get going. So I hate to cut it short, but
no, man, it's been a great conversation. Let's do it again very soon.
Looking forward to it.
I would love to. We'll just make some time soon. Right. This will probably be like a little under 2 weeks before it airs, and then we'll probably start talking before this one even gets released. All
right, cool.
So, had a great conversation, man.
I mean, and we're putting together a pretty good list of like topics that we can address. So I'm excited about some of the ones we got coming.
Yeah, and I mean, we've talked about a lot of it. As much as I enjoy talking politics and diving into this,
there's more.
There's so much more.
There's so much more.
It's just, I mean, I love our friendship, man. I truly.
Likewise, buddy.
I love you, buddy.
I'm so glad we were able to like set it aside. Realize that we simply misread each other.
I've had people where I've had disagreements where I'm like, I don't need them in my life. But I'm like, afterward, I'm like, I really like Brian. I
had the same
I don't want to be at odds. At odds doesn't matter. I don't want to be hostile. I don't want to be there to be hostility or even that.
No, I was sad that I didn't feel like I had your friendship in my life anymore. I was sad about that. And delighted that we both had the openness to work through it. So
awesome. Well, enjoy your appointment today.
We'll
do it again.
Okay.
All right. Thanks,
Artie.